Recording is in progress. Everybody should know that this meeting is being recorded, but it's also being recorded over there. Before we start, I just want to read this to everybody here. This has to go on the agenda of everybody in town.
I found this on the web.
Thank you. I'm really glad, Sue. Policy. Affordable Housing Committee meetings will be conducted under Robert's Rules of Order, and all participants are expected to conduct themselves with dignity and treat all those present with respect, empathy, and civility.
Hear, hear.
Here. All right, so we don't have a long agenda tonight, but the first thing is we are in the process of gathering feedback and input on the affordable housing plan. We have had a presentation to Planning and Zoning. We've had a presentation to the Board of Selectmen, and we've had a public meeting. Our plans call for another public meeting and a public hearing on May 25th. We will also meet, Kent and I have reached out to the individual selectmen just to capture their kind of long-form comments. And then we can go back in session with them and review them. But we just want to make sure everybody who has to have their opinions and their ideas incorporated has a chance to communicate that. So the way that looks now is we have 5:25 for the public hearing.
Oh, that's the public hearing.
Yes. Now this is technically due 6/1, but Rudy has said that they will not be able to vote on it until 6/4. So he is writing to the state.
6/4 is a Saturday.
Whatever it is, it's the first Wednesday in June.
The first Wednesday in June is the first, and then the next one is the 8th.
Well, it's, okay, I'm sorry, it's either the first or the 8th, that they will have it on their agenda and vote on it, but there's no meetings between the 25th and that, so they can't do it, and they want to take time to digest public input and make any more changes in the plan.
Does P&Z have to weigh in on it before it goes to the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, and he, I bumped into Rob Hendrick, chairman of P&Z in town, and he told me he will be gathering feedback from the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll probably be invited back there to discuss it before it's due, and of course we'll be with the Board of Selectmen on the 25th of May.
The Affordable Housing Committee, special meeting, I'm sorry, for P&Z, 5/4. May 4th.
It's on, they're having a special meeting for this? Great.
Sorry, who's having this special meeting?
Planning and zoning.
Planning and Zoning.
Dave, remind me, the communication that's gonna go from Rudy to the state, that is a notification that we'll be extending our deadline. We're not looking for permission, we're notifying.
We're notifying them. He doesn't think it'll be a problem, and from what I understand, talking to people, it won't be a problem since we're only talking about a week or two at most, ideally. That is the timeline that we have at this point. Is there anything missing from the timeline? Are there any, does anybody feel there's any more feedback we need to get?
I request an incidental motion. I just want to address the video that I saw. I was not at the 420 meeting, but I did watch it probably 2 or 3 times just to make my way through it. I have some comments that I'd just like to have on record, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm having trouble hearing everyone but you. Could you just speak up a little bit
sure.
louder? I can't
Sure.
hear the rest of you. Thank you.
I wrote some things down that I'd like to read, please. My feeling after watching the video is that this committee has lost or is losing trust of our residents, a good portion of our residents. There have been too many accusations of non-transparency at almost every public meeting that I have attended for us to ignore them anymore. Dismissing residents' suggestions or input is just not our job as committee members. Confronting residents at meetings and accusing them negatively is not our job as committee members either. It is against Robert rules, and as Chairman Dave, I feel that you should have called a point of order when that happened to diffuse the situation. And it could possibly avoid an ethics complaint or even censure. I also feel that there hasn't been full transparency with this committee about the statement regarding desegregate Connecticut. You support it, I did not know that. I was pretty floored when I heard that. And in addition to it, enthusiastically supporting SB 1024. Calling Ridgefield biased or segregated as a chairman or even as a board is not gaining us favor in any way, shape, or form. There have been interviews given without the consent or notice of the committee. I was asked on 2 separate occasions and was tasked to do interviews and was never called upon to do them. The statement about the interviews being completed before Mr. Kirk Carr could be interviewed is just not true. I don't feel the plan in its current state reflects Ridgefield. I think we need to gather all information from all the committees before we discuss it. I personally will not rush this process. It would be a flagrant disregard and breach of duty as a committee member. I think the committee is divided, and I think we need to get our house in order before we go ahead and send anything to the state. And I was going to raise the motion and ask for the committee to vote on asking the Board of Selectmen to request an extension past June 1st for these reasons that are discussed. Thank you.
If you would, I would like to make some comments too. I also wasn't able to attend the meeting, and it's unfortunate. I did see the same video that Lori saw, and that many people in this room probably did as well. Politically, you and I disagree on many things. But for instance, I didn't know your feelings relative to desegregate Connecticut or, SB 1024. However, my experience as a member of this committee is I have not detected a bias in how you've led this committee in terms of bringing us to the point that we are at. And frankly, the document that is brought forward had many opportunities within this committee for people to review and understand and comment on that. I didn't see everybody else's comments, but I would assume that if given the opportunity, they made comments and those comments were considered. But it wasn't as if the report as it stands was somehow shoved down everyone's throat and they had no opportunity for input. Couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. So I think there was, and there was also the contention that there wasn't a vote by this committee. I heard from the report. The whole notion was we had a draft and we wanted public input from, we wanted input from planning and zoning, so there was an informal discussion. We wanted it from the Board of Selectmen, and we wanted it from the public. In fact, we wanted a second session after hearing the first. And then we wanted a formal hearing. And then we wanted a formal presentation to the Board of Selectmen where in theory they would make a decision. No place in that process did I see a situation where every member of this committee didn't have an opportunity to express their opinion. And in fact, literally, we went through, and I'm sure someone can go back and look at the history of what we've done. All of the sections, all of the recommendations were in some fashion discussed within this committee. One of the things I find, most important is many of the people that are complaining, I would suggest, haven't read the document. There is a lot of misinformation out there. There was a view that someone expressed that said the committee, and you were suggesting that we have 1,124 more affordable homes built. That was never stated. And it's a complete fabrication, and yet that simple statement gets made. The reality of it is, and when you opened the meeting last week, you made a statement that says we basically got two choices. One is we can let the state run what they want, or we can have viable input and try to make, I guess in my instance, my view, reasonable progress towards targets and towards objectives. We may not like those, but the fact of the matter is there are laws on the books today that says we need to have a greater degree of affordable housing. And I think the plan as presented, if people look at it and actually read what it says, it does not talk about racism, desegregate Connecticut, any of those things. It talks about making modest improvements in housing in what is my opinion are people that have a connection to Ridgefield. And yes, I know we can look at statistics and say, of the people on the waiting list, only 18 are from Ridgefield. I'll give you my personal experience. My mother lived in Ridgefield for 10 years. She was on the Ballard Green waiting list for 2 years. She eventually moved into Ridgefield, lived here for 10 years, in one of Steve Zemo's apartments that was at that affordable. By the way, that apartment since expired, it went off the affordable rolls. That's when it was only limited to 20 years. But to imply that the only people that deserve to live in Ridgefield are those people that are currently in Ridgefield is, in my opinion, simply wrong. There are people, and if many of the others, you may experience that. I wanted my mother to live close to me, and fortunately she was able to do so for 10 years. There are other people that work in Ridgefield that would very much like to live here. They would be excluded from that kind of list because they aren't here already. So we can debate the numbers, and certainly there is duplication of people that are on 2 lists or whatever, and we should probably purify that because that would be relatively easy to do. But the notion that the only affordable housing we would be willing to support are for people that are already here is, in my opinion, wrong. And that's my opinion, But those are some of my thoughts, Dave. I want to thank you for the work that you've done on this committee chair. I really believe you've been a good leader and brought us to something that was not biased from either extreme. And you may hold opinions that would prefer to do something, far more extreme, and others on this committee may prefer to do much less. But at the end of the day, we need to do something that is balanced, and in many instances that means it's middle of the road. It's compromised to some degree. And I think if you, again, really spend the time at looking at what's out there, I think it does meet the objectives that attempts to try to keep as much of this as possible in the control of Ridgefield. And I think that's key. I think what's been stated for a goal is modest. I think it's 125 units over 5 years. I would venture to guess if that's our goal, we'd be lucky to achieve half of that. But the notion is I want to make some progress. I would very much like us to see getting a moratorium on 830G. If you're familiar with, cities that haven't had it, I look at something like the Four Corners of Brookfield. 4- and 5-story buildings, hundreds of units apiece, they came in exclusively under 830G. I don't want that to happen to Ridgefield. If we don't take proactive steps to put a plan in place to try to slow and stop 830G, which again, maybe we could make a stronger statement within our proposal that that's our desire. I think, we are, destined to be run by state control, and that's not something I want or I would support. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, did you want to make a motion?
Well,
You said you have an incident, do you have a motion to make?
yeah, the motion was to vote on asking the Board of Selectmen to extend the deadline, June
Until,
1st.
until is there a time?
That's something we have to discuss as a committee,
Okay, well then make the motion and we'll discuss it.
okay? I make the motion that we vote on asking the Board of Selectmen to write a letter to the state asking for an extension to the June 1st deadline for the affordable housing plan. And as far as the date, whenever we can decide.
I second.
All right, discussion.
Well, Dave, I think we heard from what you said, that this may be kind of a moot point, since it sounds like the Board of Selectmen is already on path to extend it at least some period of time, so they have the opportunity to review it. So my question is, given that, and the fact that I don't think realistically we can set a deadline in terms of how we would extend it, I personally believe we've got, Lori, what you've by and large asked for.
So who's gonna write whatever they want into the plan once they know what they want in the plan? The assurance they have, like how to make it more of a Ridgefield, pertaining to Ridgefield, as opposed to like the state you have.
If I understand, you're asking who will actually do the drafting into the plan of their
Yeah.
feedback? Well, we'll obviously have to discuss it as a committee if there are big changes, but the actual drafting has been done by Sharon and me.
Right, but, and then the thing is with the P and Z, we're gonna have the same issue, unless they get the, I think some P and Z people may have sent stuff already to you. So we probably should work on those things at times, so that when it gets to the first step, and they can see those changes are already included in the budget.
Right, now, because
So
the,
I was hoping tonight's meeting would be, okay, you guys have these meetings, I would hope that when you had those meetings, you had somebody there to record notes for our committee to be aware of what the committee did there.
they didn't give us detailed feedback though, because they hadn't read the report. I think only some of them had
I
read the
think
report.
some people made some comments at those
Right,
meetings.
but they mostly were making comments about the bullet pointed summary.
Right,
Well, I mean, my belief is, and I thought, and I think it's only fair for anyone commenting on this to, whether it's planning and zoning, the Board of Selectmen, or the public, that if they have a very specific, concern, or here's how I believe this should be added, amended, stated, I would hope they would provide that to us. If we've made recommendations that says, we think planning and zoning should open up this aperture and do this, planning and zoning needs to tell us, do they agree with that or not?
Right.
If they don't agree with it, they ought to say, what is it that they are willing to do? Because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones that decide it. And I think we need to take their recommendations into consideration before we would, say, well, we don't care what you say, we're gonna put that recommendation in. If we know that it's going to be universally, rejected by planning and zoning, or the Board of Selectmen, this is a report that's gonna go on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. It needs, at the end of the day, to represent what they believe. So if the Board of Selectmen doesn't like the tone, the nature, the direction of a specific set of comments, then they need to come back to us and say, here's how we'd like this restated. It can't be in this vague, I don't like this. I mean, it's got to be something specific that says, here's how we would like this changed or altered. And I think that's reasonable. And I think that's reasonable for the public too, in a a somewhat structured format to provide us feedback. And yes, we understand when we hear things at a meeting, that's important, but we're not taking that word for word and said, this person said this, and therefore now that's going to become part of the report. We need to, we're trying to gather input from different points of view. And when we have those different points of view, another modification can be made to the document. But that's the process that I thought we were trying to get through, and I think it's the path that we're still on.
Well, this May 4th meeting with P and Z, is that all what they're going to be doing at that meeting?
I
is
assume that
giving
this
us
was
specific
the
feedback?
first I heard of it. I guess they voted on this last night.
Can I make a proposal? I think we need to designate someone as a draftsperson, and all comments from P and Z, from the public, from members of the committee, should go to a draftsperson to put together a reconciled document that will at least reflect what input we've received, so that the committee can consider all the comments as a whole and decide which ones are worth
Right.
incorporating into the document, which will be, and I believe that before it goes to the selectmen for their consideration, that we should have a vote on it, and we should decide whether we're all comfortable with it
Right.
at that time, which is what I understood, by the way, that
Right.
we were doing all along.
Right, so Sharon and I have been drafting. Kent and I will be meeting with the selectmen, and all of us who can will be at the planning and zoning meeting. So we will be able to compile that list of input. I think you and I can do it, and then we can gather it at planning and zoning. And yes, then we have to have a meeting and go through it, and then we have what we believe is our draft to present for final approval.
So can I just stop you in there? So when we did our, had this a special meeting to discuss the information session and the fact that they weren't communicated to the committee, you guys said you wanted to have one meeting in place as opposed to postponing both meetings. So you can have the information gathered, so you can start drafting it into the plan, putting it into the plan. So we've had 1, 2, 3 meetings, and we have nothing to draft into the plan as a result of those meetings?
Well, we don't have their feedback yet. It's a 48-page plan. They have to read it and think about it and give us their feedback.
So
We don't have it
you
yet.
haven't received any emails from anybody with any feedback?
I feel like there's a trick question in there
No, ask the
somewhere.
question. That's the question.
I don't recall having received feedback from anybody on the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Board of Selectmen.
Nothing. So-
At the meeting, though, they made some recommendations. I
Yeah,
know
they-
John
they made
Katz
some
did,
comments, yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So why weren't those recorded and taken in for drafting into the plan, or to talk about during this meeting?
Because they were talking about the bullet point, they were making general terms, and yes, I captured what I could, but that will be part of what we discussed when we sit
Right, but
down.
I'm saying if that had been, all those stuffs had been planned out as a committee, we could have said, okay, Dave, you're gonna speak in the committee, I'll take notes, or record notes, or record comments at the least, and have that to come back and share it with the board initially. And so I could have done the same thing at the last meeting, and I don't know who took notes at the Department of Education.
Well, they had some comments, but those were to present the plan to them. They were not familiar with the plan.
Right, so.
They need to deliver. I'm sorry, is there a problem?
Yeah, I was choking, excuse me.
So the
I
board-
have something in my throat,
All right,
pardon me.
I'm gonna read the policy, and if you're
Excuse
not
me, I
able
have
to.
something in my throat.
Okay,
Sorry, sir.
all right, good.
So the Board of Selectmen meeting that I watched, they basically said, like, go back and bring us a plan that reflects Ridgefield.
Mhm.
So that's a big ask. That's not gonna be accomplished by changing a few sentences in the plan. So I think we should wait, or we should have captured, what do you mean by that? Like,
Well, they didn't give us specific feedback, they just gave us some general overarching thoughts based on the presentation.
and none of
So
those-
we're expecting to get the formal feedback and we'll bring it back to the committee and make decisions based on what they supply us, but we can't debate it or discuss it yet because we haven't received it.
Right, so those overarching thoughts can be given to us as like heads up, this is what they said. We should start to think about ways to address this as a committee so that when we get the incorporated to the plan, so we can see altered plan and go from there, as opposed to like going through the whole thing. We could let them know we made these changes ahead of time.
Well, okay, this is what I was gonna say before you wouldn't let me finish, which was that we cannot file a revised plan, because then there needs to be another plan, revised plan posted, then there needs to be another 35 days. What we can do is present a red line version. In other words, this is the way it was, these are the changes we're proposing to make. Once, after the town hearing, unless there are no more, if there are no more changes to be made, then we can put that into the final plan and hand it to the Board of Selectmen for approval.
On that. So we have a hearing that's still on May 25th,
Hmm?
given the fact that the plans can be delayed to the state. So there's that 35-day silicon, 5-day silicon plan.
We know that the Board of Selectmen will not be able to vote on it until their first meeting in June.
Right, so the 35-day hearing notice. to
Well,
make
we
it
don't,
the
we don't have
25th.
to, we don't have to file, we don't have to have another hearing.
Dave, when do we expect to get the more formalized results and thoughts of the planning and zoning committee? Like, is there a deadline?
May 4th, I
May
guess.
4th.
May
So
4th,
what
we'll get it
they
from them.
what they discussed at the meeting last night was that they were going to, they asked each individual committee member to write some bullet points down of things that they wanted to have in the plan. So they're gonna do that, and then they're going to discuss at this special meeting everyone's thoughts on it, and then, I guess, present it to us. They didn't say when, but that's what that was my takeaway from the meeting, and it was set for May 4th. I asked if, if we can speak, we can't speak,
Or we cannot
but we
speak?
can attend.
Oh, you just
We
listen.
can just listen.
So at that point, the ball will be back in our court to digest their feedback.
Yes.
And to
But
incorporate
I
it
don't
in the
know what
plan.
their timeline is. They're gathering the information. What I'm not clear is whether on the 4th they will have that information gathered after they spoke to one another, or if the information is gonna be given to us on the 4th. And that's something you'd have to just ask Rob.
Right. So there's a motion on the floor to postpone the postpone submission until a non-specific date. Rudy has said that they're going to postpone it until they have a chance to vote on it. Knowing that, do you want to withdraw your motion, or do you still want to make the motion, or do you want to amend it in any way?
Well, that's up to the committee, and that's something I think we need to discuss as a committee. Do you think we can all get it together?
Well, I
With
think
all the meetings that we're gonna
I
have?
mean, I guess my
With
reaction
all the
is,
input,
at the
yeah.
end of the day, it's the Board of Selectmen's decision in terms of when they want to submit this. Apparently, they've already gone quite formally on record, it sounds like, that they are not going to meet the June 1st date. What date they're going to meet, at some point, it's up to them. I mean, I guess we can, I don't know what it means to vote on something that they've already declared they're not gonna do. I don't think we have the authority to tell them, here's the date. You can't do it until at least June 15th, June 30th, September 1st. They're gonna do it when they want to do it, but they've already decided to delay it and effectively be late to the state requested deadline.
So what I understand of the law is that we can notify the state that there will be a delay. But tell me if I'm wrong, we have to, that communication has to include with it a reason for the delay.
And
So-
the expected date that will be submitted.
Yes, so I think that if we're gonna consider a motion to extend the deadline, we need to all get on board with what exactly we'll be telling the Board of Selectmen in terms of, we need to delay because of what reason, and what are we gonna be doing in the time that is occupied by the delay.
Well, I mean, I think we could support the notion that says we respect the first selectman's decision to delay the submission of the of the plan until such time as they have feel they've properly vetted and voted on it. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's theirs. I mean, that to me is more, if there's a motion that, I believe we should make and I could support, it's like, it's up to them. They've apparently already indicated they're going to request a deferral, and to me, that's fine. It's at the end of the day, this is their plan that we help to facilitate, and so I'm just struggling with the motion. If we wanna make a motion that says we support the fact that the Board of Selectmen, intend to delay the submission of the plan until they've, had time to properly, understand and vote on the plan, why not? I mean, that's their prerogative, and apparently they're already taking that prerogative.
That's what I'm saying, it might be moot.
Right.
Well,
So-
but it's your motion, so
Right.
you can choose to
I can
amend
withdraw
it,
it.
you can withdraw it.
Withdraw it, or you can amend it to something like we said. I mean, I just, because it sounds like they're already on path to do what you want to do.
Well, let me ask another question. Is it your understanding that the reason they've told us they won't be voting on it until June, I think it's the 8th, right? Is simply because that the deadline falls on the 1st and they don't meet again until the 8th?
Correct.
Or is it some other reason that they need to do
No.
more?
It's because they will not have an opportunity to vote on it before the deadline.
It is a lot to digest, it's
Sure.
a huge document, and then for planning and zoning to go through it. And then we're gonna get their feedback, and I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of feedback or just a little. If it's just a little,
Yeah.
it's very easy. But if it turns out to be something that's kind of a new idea that we have to kind of mull over, it could take some time. I don't know, how can we build a little time in case we need it into the schedule? Can we, and then we could probably make our delay our next meeting, or,
Right, but I mean, my humble opinion is, I don't think the Board of Selectmen is gonna submit this until they're ready. I actually would hope that's the choice they make. They're not going to, if they meet on the 8th, I think there's a high chance they're gonna say, okay, now we've had a chance to talk about it, and we're still not ready.
Well, I
But
think-
they're either gonna be ready or they're not.
well, I think planning and zoning is gonna especially have a lot to say on this.
Well, and planning and zoning will have an opportunity to provide feedback early next week, and then we'll have another, month to, conceivably do more, right?
I think that as we get detailed feedback from planning and zoning, and from the public, and from, and from others, as more specific comments come in, that may be very illuminating as to how much we need to do on the plan. So, Lori, I might suggest considering a motion like that, maybe after we've seen more about what's coming in.
That's fine.
If we're gonna need to do a lot of work to accommodate what everyone says, then
Right.
the timeline may not be feasible.
Mhm.
If, we don't get a specific and detailed feedback about changes from planning and zoning and others, then the timeline may be reasonable.
Are we having another public information session? We were supposed to have 2.
Yeah,
Yes,
That has not been determined yet, the date.
we're determining it at this meeting.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I just have one question about the next public meeting. So will we have someone writing down, this is sort of to your point,
Mhm.
will we have someone writing down the public's comments?
Yes.
And then we will review those at some point?
Yes.
And we
That should've been
will
done all
agree with
along.
them, or we will disagree with them as a committee?
Right.
I guess my point is that should have been done all along at all these meetings, because you're going there to make a presentation, and in my old job, people would take notes as I'm presenting something to my customer, whoever it was. And just kind of going forward without having that plan in place, I just feel like,
But one thing too, and maybe it is as we communicate the next public meeting, I think we need to try to make sure, because I know there's a lot of emotion, and I'm not criticizing that, there's a lot of emotion, but we need to make sure that who's ever responding, maybe they show their emotion, but they also say specifically,
right,
here is what I would like, right? And here it is in a sentence or two. We've taken all of those, that doesn't mean they're necessarily gonna be incorporated into the plan or the proposal, but it would be nice to have a concise statement of, here is specifically what I would like to see. And I would hope that Planning and zoning does that, the Board of Selectmen eventually gets there to us, and the public does that when they've got that, and then the committee can look at it and say, what do we feel about, because there are gonna be many different points of view. There are gonna be some that are diametrically opposed. So at the end of the day, and we could conclude in the report to indicate there are opposing views, that this isn't universally accepted. I mean,
Well, I
that's
agree with you totally, but I just wanna make sure that we have a sense of urgency,
right.
you know?
But I think we do, and I think, you know, to the point, we do have to decide on that next
Because there's
date.
gonna be a lot of back and forth,
Right,
you know, among three different entities,
Right.
right.
and four if you include us.
But we need to decide on what that next date is, right, for that next, you know, public input session,
We will get there.
okay?
Lori, you brought up a bunch of thoughts.
Okay, but one question, I'm sorry,
Yes.
was the motion withdrawn? I mean, basically?
Yes, the motion was,
Yes.
you want to state that the motion is withdrawn?
Motion is
Okay,
withdrawn.
thank you. So you made a couple of comments. Can I address them within the context of the agenda item on the table, the Affordable Housing Planning Grant? Or would you like to create a separate agenda item that talks about the management of the committee?
No, go,
Okay,
however you feel.
just a couple of things. First of all, that meeting was not an official meeting of the committee. It was a public information meeting and was not subject to Robert's Rules of Order. It was not called to order under
Even though
Robert's.
there was a
There
quorum.
was a quorum though.
Yeah, but we still not, it was noticed, but it was not, it was not a meeting, it was not an official meeting. So there's no need to open it, no need to adjourn, and no need to provide minutes. I've confirmed this with the town.
Well, one would call it a illegal meeting since there was a quorum. That's, I guess, what we're trying to say.
That's, was my concern, there was a quorum here.
There was a quorum here, but it was for a public input session.
Right, so back when we met in the rec center with Glenn and company and the public, you asked us some of us to stay back, because we all couldn't be there.
Right.
It was an informational session, you asked some of us to stay back, we couldn't have a quorum there.
Right.
Isn't the same thing that happened at the public meeting?
No, because we since learned that we can have a public information meeting without making it a formal meeting of the committee.
Okay.
Next
I mean,
thing,
I'm not sure how that changes though, nothing has changed, what would change that? When you say things
well, we were
learned?
just trying to be safe then, because there were all kinds of accusations flying around. So we didn't really have a lot of time, so we just said, okay, stay out of it.
But did Wendy say that it's okay to have us all there?
We had to notice the meeting,
Right.
which we did as a public
Information
information, it's a public information session, but it's not an official meeting. The town does this all the time.
Right, but at the cannabis meetings, the marijuana meetings, they weren't all there at the same time, the board of selectmen. They were there, like, two were there one day, two were there another, they weren't all there at the same time, which could constitute a meeting. So I'm wondering, from the discussion we had back in the Glenn meeting, what changed from when they tell you that this now be okay for recording?
This was in my discussions with Rudy. You're welcome to append this to the ethics complaint that you filed, but my understanding was it was not an official meeting, it was an information session. It was noticed, there were no minutes taken, it was not a hearing, it was a public presentation.
So once again, you said, you were calling me out to say that I thought that ethics against you. That's still not part of acting themselves at Robert's Rules of Order. You're being very disrespectful and trying to shame me in public. Why are you doing that?
I'm not trying to shame you, you filed an ethics complaint
You're
against
supposed
me.
to treat people with dignity and respect.
I'm treating you with dignity and respect.
By telling people that I filed an ethics opinion,
Is that not a fact?
is it? Is it a fact?
That you filed an
Is
ethics
it?
complaint against me? Absolutely, I received a copy of it.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
Because when a complaint is filed against you, you have an opportunity to respond to it.
Right.
So I've been offered an opportunity to
Great.
respond to it, which I
Typically,
will.
they tell you that not really talk about that in the public. So, it's like, I'm very surprised that you're saying that. It's probably something that kept private for reasons.
Well, it's a complaint against me.
Right, but you're supposed to be mentioning it in a public meeting.
No one ever told me I can't mention it.
Nobody told you anything, Dave, no.
Um,
I don't know, part.
What is this? This is ridiculous.
Next,
Like, we're not even here. Am I right? Like,
you'll
we're
come
not
to
even
order,
here.
please. 1024, the article that was read at the last meeting. I am allowed to express my opinion and I'm not required to run it before the committee in advance. And that's what that was. It was my personal opinion. So I just wanted to address those things specifically. Now, we have talked about the remaining timeline for the plan with the exception of, oh, is there anything else on that before we move on to setting a date? Anything else?
Yeah, actually, asked you before, when you scheduled information sessions, I was away. I found out about them on Facebook, nobody communicated that to me, or, I know, everybody asked them about the dates. But, you didn't have time to get that information in the paper. But here you are, the next day after the meeting, in the paper. So how does one get in the paper, talk about a meeting, and not getting in the paper, talk about the meeting happening in town?
Yeah.
So, like, I
Yeah,
don't,
what's the,
the point is, you said that you couldn't get the meeting in paper because of the switch in editors. But yet, the next day after the meeting, there's an article in the paper by you and Marie.
I see what you're saying. When we made the meeting, when we scheduled the meeting, the public information meeting, I notified the press, and then I followed up on it, and they did not respond. They did not respond. I found out later this is because the editor was no longer the editor. They had not let anybody know that yet. But I sent them the information, and I followed it up. So that's why it was not in the paper. Regarding this, this was after the meeting, the writer called me, and so I spoke to her.
Right, but there are other ways to make this public information, like, how to attach, and we took none of those actions to make those.
I didn't put it on Hamlet Hub. I put it on Facebook, and I sent emails out to people. And I asked all of you to promote it as well. All right.
I wasn't here and I don't know about anything, so how can I promote something I didn't know about?
How what, sorry?
How could I promote something I didn't know about?
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. So we need to pick a time for the next public information session. When do we want to do that?
Well, what do we know is taking place between now and then? We know we've got a 5/4 date that we're gonna get input from planning and zoning.
Yeah, just firm it up with them.
Right, and then when is the next Board of Selectmen meeting? And then, I'm sorry, and then we know we have a currently scheduled 5/25 public hearing, right?
5:25 hearing, yeah.
So, I mean, logically, it's gotta be between those two dates. I don't know if is there a Board of Selectmen meeting that's taking place between those two dates, or between now and?
I think
Are
next
you
week.
trying to get the next public information? Is
Right,
that what we're trying
right,
to
that's
do?
what we're talking about. I mean, just,
I'm sorry, can we, I forgot one thing about Lori's point about Kirk. So you had a meeting once that you said that it was too late to interview Kirk because all the interviews had taken place already.
Right, I said I would interview him, but I didn't.
So you said to me that you didn't have time to interview because all the interviews were done already. What he said.
Yeah, we had completed all the interviews, he wanted to be interviewed, I said yes, and then I changed my mind.
Why? Who did you actually interview? I'd like to see those.
There's a list of we conducted like 30 some odd interviews.
Who's waiting?
The committee.
The committee.
Deborah, you're free to interview people.
Really? I thought they signed people.
No, I conducted a bunch of interviews.
Oh,
I know
okay.
Kent did. you're free to interview whoever you like, and I'll tell you, with respect to Mr. Carr, he comes to these meetings, we have his input. He sent us a lengthy document with his input. I'm not sure, I don't understand the complaint.
The point is, you said you'd have to have an interview. He was one of the first people in line to interview. Why
Well,
would you
Back
not-
in
the thing- the
December. I
inter-
just don't think you wanted him.
Yeah.
He said he changed his mind.
The interviews were for
People who bring.
town leaders and stakeholders that we selected. He was not on the original list.
The person-
I said I would interview him, and I changed my mind.
The list of people that were interviewed, did we ever discuss that at a meeting?
Yes, many times.
Who?
This was a long time ago. This was-
Yeah, but
this
who
was-
were the people that were interviewed?
There was, well, I mean.
The superintendent of schools, the head of the teachers union, there were clergy people.
I interviewed the president and owner of Ridgefield Supply. Whit, you and I interviewed the Ridgefield Development.
Planning and economic
Committee.
development, we
I
interviewed all the selectmen.
I
all of the
interviewed
selectmen.
the Prospector Theater leadership
Well, that's
team.
news to me, because during the assignments, we were assigned tasks. What your assignments were for you and Lori.
Is it too late
This was
to
like-
interview?
So this was in
This was like
2019.
a year and a half or.
Yeah, it was a while ago, yeah.
Can we still
So-
interview him? Maybe we should just interview him, get it out
But
of the
I'm
way.
saying, like, we're talking about interviews going back to 2019. I mean, I just joined the board last year, April
Right.
21, and all this plan stuff is next. So you're saying interview people from 19
2019, yeah,
to
in
this plan?
2020, I think.
To this plan? That's-
Yeah, because we started back then.
No, the plan was to be, put a group together, you and Lori, to interview people. in
Well, we
town.
had we were talking about
Interview.
supplemental interviews.
Yes, you said to interview people.
Is it too late to interview someone if we want to add an interview?
No, interview, do whatever we want.
Can I make a motion that if some people in this group want to interview someone, that they are welcome to do so?
Yeah, I second that motion.
I was like, a list of questions that were asked by the interviewers, so you follow the same route.
And
Okay.
I think we have-
So
I
it's
think we have
on,
a- I think
so
we
it's
have a
even,
template
so
list
everyone's
of
asked the same
questions.
questions.
There should be a standard list of questions that all were asked, and hopefully we can all see it the same way.
All right, discussion. Do you want to restate the motion so that make sure Cheryl gets it? Cheryl, did you get that motion?
Is she on mute?
She might have muted herself.
So,
She muted herself.
I'm sorry, can we, hold on.
Well, it should probably have more limits, it should probably have more limits on it, but if we want to add an interview or two, or, a limited number of interviews, that it is not too late to do so. We can do so in the next 2 weeks or whatever, 10 days.
Sure.
Till May 4th. Can I make a motion for us to,
Well, even, you said May 4th, they've been later than that, I think, but certainly 14 days or something like from this point in time, I mean, there maybe needs to be some end date, but it probably needs to be, I would suggest it's a couple weeks. But if any member of the committee would like to proactively or reactively interview anyone, that should be their prerogative, and they have the opportunity to bring that information probably back in a documented form to the committee for our further, understanding, right? I mean,
could it get out of hand if someone goes out and starts surveying
Yes.
200 people?
It could, but I think it's constrained by the time. I don't think that's going to happen, but the point is, it's going to be constrained by the capacity of the people around this table and their interest and willingness to interview people, and to document it back
It
such
was
that the
never a
committee can consider it.
scientific process, I mean, there's,
It was qualitative, right? It was qualitative.
Right.
We did the survey.
there's like 10,000 households.
Right.
I think at the time, we just wanted to get a sense of people in the community who are leaders.
So you guys just said you're taking interviews from 2019. Lots of things have changed since then.
The guy I interviewed died.
Right, so,
Oh, no, who is
So,
that?
Arnie Leitner.
so you said that the committees were assigned to be you and Lori, interviews.
No, that was supplemental
Do you do that,
interviews.
you know, although Roy and I could already interviews, that doesn't mean we all can conduct them ourselves. You ever reached out?
Right.
Did you ever reach out to Roy?
Did I ever, yeah, I think we spoke once or so about it. It just, you know, we had so much to do, we already had 30 interviews in the can, so we didn't conduct any more interviews.
But are they?
But the motion on the table says we're opening up the aperture, and if anybody would like to conduct more interviews.
Okay,
I
but
guess the question too is what do we do with the information from these interviews?
But again, it's like any information, you know, public comment, whatever it is. I mean, it's part of the information that this committee can stare at and decide whether or not we believe it merits inclusion in the document.
So I'd like to, if I can, I'd like to propose a modification to Chris's motion. I'd like to propose, and to some extent this may be duplicative, I'd like to propose that the committee consider all input from members of the public. We should encourage that that input be provided in written form, and that will include notes of interviews conducted by any member of the committee. We should be encouraging all input and all views to come in here.
But to be specific, the way Kent mentioned it, that not just to complain, but to actually have the reword it. or
Yes, well,
actually-
I would trust that if a member of the committee went out and took an interview, that the information that would come back would be tailored to that person's, the interviewee's, specific comments. So I don't think there's any magic or anything special to, well, was there a formal interview conducted? Because the point is, we're just looking for information. We chose those people. We chose the superintendent of schools because she wasn't coming to the meetings telling us what she thought and what her information was. We went to get that information from them. We don't need to go to Kirk Carr because he comes to the meetings. He sent us a quite lengthy document explaining his views. But if you want to interview him and take down notes and submit them to the committee, then I think we should consider that as well as his long document.
What were the questions that, what was asked? What was asked?
I-
So if I was tasked with it, I mean, Dave,
They were
you
quite.
may
I
have,
have the-
I don't
yeah, I have
remember,
the- I have
I
the
don't
discussion
remember a
guide.
phone call, but if I'm tasked with it, I need to know what to ask them. Right?
Well,
I mean,
we
I
can
can ask
do
them
that.
about their health if,
I
you
can-
know.
Yeah, we had a
can
list,
find
we had a list that was a
List of
discussion
questions.
guide,
Okay.
and we can circulate that.
So the other.
But at the end of the day, it was still pretty much, it had some points we wanted to touch on, but at the end of the day, we were looking for their opinions and views on the need and desires for housing, affordable housing in Ridgefield. I mean, to boil it down, that's what it was. And it, you know, it varied. I remember the person that we interviewed, I forgot his name. I mean, one of his views is we have plenty of affordable housing, it's in Danbury. I mean, that's pretty much what he said.
I guess the problem I have, because I'm just finding out of this now that these interviews are years old in some cases. That, like, the interviews in 2019 do not apply to interviews today. The world has changed so much since 2019. Why do we not do fresh interviews?
Well, let's not talk about the past, let's start now and conduct some interviews now to balance it out from what
Right,
happened
but I'm saying that
2
all
years
those
ago.
interviews should be scrapped.
I mean,
Disagree with
I
that.
personally, I disagree, because I spoke to those people, other than the gentleman that died, that Whit and I interviewed. I am confident that there is no change in opinion of the people that I spoke to, because I was speaking to business people in some instances that says, we can't get employees because they can't live here. And it's a challenge. Our employees drive from Bridgeport and far away, and it's difficult to attract them even at a decent wage. So I personally don't see any need, because I don't think it didn't relate to COVID, it wasn't a period of time. It was comments relative to, in many instances, you know, their perception as a business person in terms of what it takes to attract people. In the perspective of the Prospector Theater, obviously they were, you know, in many instances talking about people with disabilities and what it meant to them to have affordable housing. I'm highly confident that the people that I interviewed, their positions aren't gonna change. I mean, you talk to somebody that represented,
How many of the injuries that are listed in our plan, how many interviews were done? How many of those were done this year? How many were done last year? How many were done in 2019?
well, at least the ones I did, I think were all done in either late 2019, I forget where they were, but you know, the fact of the matter is, I am personally confident that the people that we interviewed, their opinions are not gonna change. They, if anything, their ability to hire people got more challenging in the past few years, not easier. So I mean, the point is, we have a body of knowledge. I mean, to the suggestion that's made, if we'd like to gather more, then I think that's fine.
But I just, we're created a plan. We had tasks, we plan, we had a guy, paid a guy $11,000 to develop a plan, what should we do? Interviews. Those should all be fresh interviews, we're working on a new plan.
But we've received input through things like the town survey. You know, we summarized a lot of those comments and inputs, and many of them, they're telling us the same things. They're not telling us.
Interviews right now, please?
What's that?
I'm talking about interviews, can we stay to interviews right now?
The interview.
I'm talking about interviews, can we stay on topic of the interviews? Cause that's the survey, I have survey stuff I want to talk about as well. So interviews were done in 2019, and we feel that the committee, they're fresh enough to be told us a real story in today's day and age, 2022, 3 years later, they're still relevant. Even though the town and world has changed so much, they're still relevant. 3 years. I thought all these interviews were being done fresh, new, as a result of this whole
We've
plan.
received a lot of fresh and new data. We've received the survey that's been out there. And in many instances, Deborah, they're not telling us earth-shattering different things. They're telling us, the people that I talk to, and again, I'm, you know, consider the source. I'm looking at a business entity that struggles to find employees. They were very, you know, adamant that the lack of near-in affordable housing was a challenge for them. I am highly confident that that view isn't going to change. And it's true of, you know, others. I mean, if I went back and re-interviewed the leaders of the Prospector Theater, I'm sure they're still going to say that there is a need for, you know, housing for the people with the disability. That's fundamentally what I learned from the interview. I could go back and ask if you changed your mind, that you no longer think that people with disabilities need housing in Ridgefield, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that, but it's
Or I
like,
could go back and ask, you know, people at Ridgefield Supply and others if they think that they have plenty of employees and they don't need, you know, that local housing isn't a concern.
I guess my concern is that, wait, I just found out about this today, so what else am I finding out about that I didn't know that's in this plan?
Well, Deborah, you've been on this committee for quite some time now.
A year.
And,
A year
you
this
know,
month.
yeah, it should not be a surprise to you that the interviews were not conducted while you've been on the committee. So I think if you have a motion that you want to.
Well, there's a motion.
There's a motion on the table already, but that says, let's have more interviews if you so choose to have
Well,
them.
why would I be under the impression that interviews had been taking place already? When you talk about having that incorporated into the plan, assigning people to do them.
I thought there were some, since, you know, maybe in the last year, there were some interviews conducted within the last year, weren't there?
Well, not in the formal interview section, we just had so much other stuff to do, we were not able to do that.
We did the survey this past year.
All right.
But the interviews were linked in the to-do document of assignments, and people were assigned to do interviews. I thought those interviews would be part of the plan and be current interviews, not interviews from 2019.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
Am I the only one that has a problem with that? Maybe I am. Am I?
Well, that's why I've opened up the motion.
That's why there's a motion on the table.
I did not know that the interviews were done that long ago. I thought they were still going on,
Well, I mean.
but I wasn't called.
Right.
Or we could not use any of the information from the interviews.
Well, let's put it this way, I mean,
No,
directly,
I
did we say this
I'm just,
person?
I think this is more of a communication issue.
Right, no, I understand,
than-
but I mean, the interviews were to, in a broad sense, that says, employers in town feel that there is a concern in hiring because there's not a local supply of affordable housing and their employees have to travel a great distance in order to get here. So that was a general sense. You know, and I think that in the document, we didn't reference that specifically, but certainly we talk about, you know, the notion of, you know, needing housing for people that are locally employed but are not here, right? And the same kind of thing, we talked about people with disabilities. Did we say it's because somebody at the Prospector Theater said that that was the case? No, it's because, you know, we understand it from a lot of different discussions we have. But we weren't trying to capture he said, she said, and here it is in the interview. We're trying to help confirm the fact that there is a need for some level of workforce housing. There is a need for a level of housing for the disabled. There is a need for senior housing, those kind of things that are manifest in the document, not because he said, she said, but because they have been confirmed because we've had outreach into the community, and it's just like the survey did, because the survey told us some things, and the survey didn't tell us that people were, universally, everybody felt that, you know, Ridgefield was devoid of affordable housing. I think that's been captured in the document in terms of what, you know, what the general consensus was. Because there certainly are people, legitimately, however you might look at it, that say, we're good. We've got naturally occurring affordable housing, and we're done. We don't need any more. And, you know, and if that isn't coming through the document clear enough, then maybe it needs to be, right? I think that if there are opposing views, they can be noted in the document. They don't need to be necessarily the recommendation of this committee, right? Because there's always going to be opposing views, but if there's something that there is a significant number of people that have a view that we're full up on affordable housing, then that should be acknowledged in our document. And some of that we've heard through the survey, as an example. So
I think that, given the fact that most, if we're saying that all these interviews aren't done before, undone, the interview data that we're using is from 2019,
In 2020, yes.
we should just scrap it, because it's not.
But Deborah, we didn't put it in discreetly in the first place. There is nothing that, like I said, there's nothing that says, you know, we talked to this person and they said this. What we came away from is the general feeling that we need more housing for local workforce. We need more housing we would like to see more housing for disabled. We would like to see more housing for seniors that would like to age in place and remain in Ridgefield. That's the kind of input we take. We didn't take interviews and say, she said, he said.
Right.
And so, you know, that isn't how we used them in the first place.
Thank you. We're gonna have to move forward a little bit. I just want to clarify the motion once again. Could you restate the motion, please, Cheryl?
I was actually gonna ask, so
Okay.
this was Krista's motion,
Krista's
right?
motion, could you restate it?
Oh dear, I'm forgetting what my motion was exactly.
I was gonna ask the exact wording, that that people propose additional interviews to be done, and also they can go and do interviews on their own. Was that the second part of it?
Correct.
That wording okay?
Yes, that there would be further interviewing done by members of our committee as
With committee provide questions.
using the same questions that we had used.
That's fine. Sure. I have a question about that. So when we did the interviews, we interviewed town leaders, kind of key stakeholders in town. Do we want to open this up to interview anybody now? Or do we want to interview more leaders? And if we are interviewing anybody, do we give that different weight than the leaders? How do we incorporate that into the plan? Because people commented on the survey for sure. We had lots of comments there. So how should we do this, do you think?
Well, I think if people are interested in getting interviewed, they should reach out to us.
So it's to interview anybody?
Well, an alternative way to handle it would be that the way we're asking for input from planning and zoning and board of selectmen in writing and specific, maybe that's not necessarily an interview. Maybe we're asking the public to do a line-by-line specific commentary on.
If we could get the questions that we asked, maybe send them out to the people who asked for them. fill out.
Was the interview more useful, or is the response to our document more useful at this time?
Just so everyone's, the table is sort of set for everyone, the questions in that template were very open-ended. They were really discussion points. It was, for example, what is affordable housing as far as you're concerned? Questions like that.
How do you define
How
affordable
do you
housing?
define affordable housing?
Right.
In my opinion, the proper purpose for an interview is to get input from people who haven't provided it. So I think we should encourage input from all the members of the community, and we should use the interviews to get information from people who don't know about the committee, don't know about the plan, can't come here. And I do think that there should be a preference for leaders and other stakeholders who speak for some sort of constituency.
Do you want to, are you suggesting that we invite email comments?
Yes.
From the public?
Absolutely.
Okay, would you like to amend your motion to that, or is that
So
something
make
you don't
sure
want?
something gets out to seniors too. I think they're an important group. that
Where
we
they
should-
email them to?
We can put some, we have an email address. We can,
Which one's that?
housingforridgefield@gmail.com. We don't have an official town email.
We probably should get one, I think.
I'll ask if we can get one.
I think we can get one.
Ridgefield at what? Gmail.
It's housing4ridgefield@gmail.com.
Who manages that email?
That comes to me.
So, I think people might be more comfortable sending it to like a town email address.
Okay, we'll get a town email to send it to. Would you like to amend the motion in any way, Krista?
So now, we are sending out, is it actually interviews still, or is it?
I think we should just send out the questions, post it in a public paper, whatever it is, patch, have it out. These are the questions we asked interviewers for the plan. We want to share it with the public. If you have feedback, hear the questions, answer them, and email them to the email address.
Well, I would just suggest that I think now that we have a draft plan, that we can ask people for reactions to, that's more productive than asking open-ended questions at this stage. We asked the open-ended questions sort of as we were beginning and in the midst of sort of the collective thought process about what will the plan look like and what does the community think. Now, we've taken a lot of that on board.
Right.
If the view is that maybe some of that information is stale, let's, the draft plan is out there.
Right.
Let's ask for feedback.
Okay.
I mean, we're doing it with these information sessions, it's not that we're not doing
Right,
it, but a more, I think a
I think that would be
specific
much more
request to say,
productive.
So I agree with that.
what specific comments do you have about the plan would be really helpful, because there were some at the last meeting. Somebody commented, like, we should put more emphasis on residential housing above first floor
Yeah.
commercial space on Main Street. I thought that's a great idea, so we should encourage more specific comments about what should or should not be in the plan.
So how do we do that? How do we get the public aware of that?
We can create a release and put it out there. We can invite public comment
Put it
in the press, Facebook, and all the other.
So,
The hub gets a lot. The patch.
Okay, great.
So what if, like, who's gonna do that and when?
Sharon and I can do that, and we'll do it pronto. So, but let's,
So we'll have it press, patch,
patch, Hamlin, whatever. So, do you want to withdraw and offer a new motion, Krista?
Yes, I'll withdraw that, and I will offer in this place that we will welcome public, and we will put out, some public announcements that we are welcoming, public feedback on our document. And we want specific feedback.
Specific comments
Okay.
and
Comments.
So this is a motion to solicit public feedback in the form of email. Feedback to the plan in the form of email
Email or letters.
or letter. Okay,
Containing specific comments and suggestions about the language.
do you have that? Solicit public feedback to the plan by email or letter with specific reaction and comment
specific
on the
comments
plan.
and suggestions.
Comments and suggestions to the plan.
specific comments and suggestions regarding the plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
In writing, via email or letter.
So, so that is the new motion. Is there a second? Okay, that was Sharon. Discussion. Any more discussion?
I think it's a great
Sorry,
idea
who
because we could,
seconded? Who seconded?
Sharon?
Sharon seconded.
Okay, good.
Any more discussion?
that will
Okay,
help for people who can't make the
Right.
meetings,
great,
seniors,
great idea.
yeah.
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 Okay.
How do
Any
we
other-
get, how do we get it out to people who maybe aren't, savvy to all those?
Probably
the
the
press,
newspapers
yes,
still.
All right, is there more discussion?
I just had one last question.
Yes.
How many interviews were done in the last 6 months?
Interviews for this? None.
Well, doesn't it seem like the interviews were kind of the predecessor that kind of helped
Background.
Yes.
shape the survey?
Got
They-
it.
they-
Sort
right.
of like,
Got it.
it wasn't really for the purpose of this document.
There's
but
not
it was
a
just shape-
single comment
Yeah.
from those interviews that made it into this document because it was trying to
Oh.
create a background for the most part.
There's a section on it where we had some debate and it's from that.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I
It's,
missed it.
it's in there, I forget what section,
All right.
but it's in here.
So last point,
Yeah.
is that, again, I question why you wouldn't worry or have to have interviews and or never did this interview.
Okay. Any other comments?
We vote.
Let's have a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed?
Okay.
Okay, the motion is unanimous.
Yay.
All right. Did we pick a date
No.
for the new presentation?
So it'd be between the 4th and the 25th.
I think so.
Should it be on a Saturday, or does it?
Well, that was the original thinking, because the last time was during the week, and this would be for people who maybe can't make it during the week. But, I don't know, what do you think?
Because there are 4 Saturdays, the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st that fall between those 2 dates.
21st is my daughter's wedding.
Oh,
You're all invited to come down there, we can turn it into a affordable housing meeting.
Can I make public comment?
But the 14th, for lack of anything else, it's, it's enough out in advance and it's 11 days before the 25th.
That's
What day is that?
The 14th, Saturday.
So do that.
Saturday, May 14th.
I'm out of town.
Sorry?
It's my anniversary, I'm out of town,
That's,
Okay.
well, everybody can't be there.
but everyone else is there. Just want to let you know I'm probably not gonna be here.
Well, happy anniversary, we'll sing to you.
We'll make a toast.
It's a cake. All right, so Saturday, May 14th has been proposed at what, like 10 o'clock? 10 to 12?
Sure.
Just have to get it.
All right. Now, is there a motion that we hold this on that date?
Public information session.
Public information session on May 14th, here from 10 to 12 a.m. From 10 a.m. to 12 noon.
Should do it later, 11 to 1.
What do
I
you
don't care.
think?
I prefer morning or afternoon, not lunch.
I like the 10 to 12. I think it doesn't, mess up the
All right.
entire day for
Do you want
people.
to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we hold that public information session 10 to 12, 7/14/21, in a location to be decided, but preferably this large conference room.
7/14/21, 22.
22, I'm sorry.
It's 5/14.
I'm sorry, 5.
So aside from the year and the month, you had that right.
Yeah, right. I got the 14th right, didn't I?
Okay, so
5/14/22.
Saturday, May 14th, 2022, not 1922.
That's right.
From 10 to 12. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Krista, second. Discussion.
How many of us can make it on that date, correct?
Right now, I can make it. Okay?
So how are we gonna get that word out? Because I think we should get the word out now. Kind of
Let's
like.
start doing it. Yep,
Reinforcing it?
Yep.
Every week?
yep, yep.
Reminder, reminder,
Yep, yep.
reminder.
Okay.
So who's gonna do that? Sharon?
You want to do it?
Right.
Okay.
I'm not.
Well, we'll do the press if you want to push it on Facebook and on our page.
Just need to have whatever you're gonna share, what's going to share. That's right.
Yeah, it'll be a press release.
I can
Do we need to confirm the venue, or we can say it's just, no problem?
Well, I mean,
No?
I assume that this room is open, but
Yeah.
Okay.
I would,
I'll
it's either
confirm-
this or an acceptable, if it's not this, it's probably the
Yeah.
annex, in the large meeting room over there, but.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this?
I just want to check and see if there's any, Board of meetings going on that day. Town,
On the 14th.
yeah, town calendar.
Time to run to the ladies' room.
Sure.
May 14th is good. Princess Anne, nothing on the town. Do you want me to do Facebook and patch?
Yeah, I mean, I'll write the press release, you can promote it or edit it. Yeah.
You guys have to,
You do patch and Facebook, we'll do the press and Hamlet Hub. Okay, also, on May 17th, we're scheduled to give a short talk to the Democratic Town Committee. And then on the 19th, we want to get to the Republican Town Committee, but we don't have anybody from the committee, well, we don't have Kent or I can't make either of those sessions. Is there somebody on the committee who would like to present the plan to them on the 19th? If not, I can ask them for an alternate date.
I'm away.
so we're going to those people?
Yes.
Just curious, why?
Why?
Do we do?
To,
Give them a forum.
yeah, to give them a chance to learn more about it.
Okay, so we decided that as a group?
No. Do we need to decide this as a group? It's not my understanding, that we need to vote on every single thing. But if you want, we can vote on it.
Okay.
You want to vote on it? Vote on it. All right. So, Krista, we have to vote on
So why
your
do-
motion.
I was gonna say,
This is separate. All in favor of Krista's motion, raise your hand.
which is,
I thought
This
we-
is the second,
we did all right.
We did it already,
I thought we already did it.
Yeah, we did.
We're unanimous.
we did it for both?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know there was more than one.
No, there's only one.
One motion.
On 5/14/22 from 10
Oh,
to
that
12,
motion, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
10 to
The
12.
second motion.
Oh, that's you.
Right?
Yeah, the second motion was to open up the interviews,
Oh,
right? Did we vote on that already?
Not interviews, yeah,
Let's do a double.
well, I thought we decided instead of opening up the interviews, we were going to do
the
this
pre- okay.
public
Right.
input
Yes.
and comment as, in its place.
Right. All right, and was that voted on?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you, that's what we didn't vote on.
That's what we've done.
All in favor, raise your hands.
What are we in favor of?
This
Your
is
motion.
your motion, you want to read back the motion?
Okay, that we're gonna solicit public feedback, specific comments and suggestions of the plan via, the press, the patch, the Hamlet Hub, in writing, as in email or
Letter.
letter.
We already voted on that,
That's what I
unless I completely, I think we voted.
There were two things we had to vote on. We voted on both of them?
I didn't really see this too, but I know at one point you kind of.
Did we vote on the meeting? The public meeting?
Yes.
No, that, we did not vote on the public meeting.
Oh.
And Ken, you made that motion for the public meeting?
I thought Kent did.
I did.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Yeah, Ken did.
It's Kent's
Ken
motion.
did, okay. That we
Okay,
didn't
we're
vote
back
on.
on track.
That's where we got confused.
Thank you. All right, so all in favor of Kent's motion, raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. Now, it's not my understanding that we need permission from the committee to present this information to the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee. However, in deference to those who feel it is necessary, is there a motion for us to present it to those organizations?
I just had a question.
I think
Why,
that,
why do we feel that it's necessary? Because they're members of the public, just like everybody else. So I have a special meeting.
They're a constituency that's involved and very passionate about the subject in many instances,
You
right?
should present this to anybody who will listen.
Right.
What are
I
we
mean, that's-
presenting to them? This draft or asking corporations of everything that we've,
My guess is it's a 10-minute talk. Now, yeah, it's like a 10,
Sounds like Cheryl wanted to say something.
Cheryl, did you have something? Are you frozen?
no, I just offered to make the motion, but okay.
Oh, okay. So,
Well, let me, just comment, Dave, I mean, first off, you couldn't go to any group and have a presentation and do it in less than probably 90 minutes or
Yeah,
an
that's what I'm
hour.
saying.
But I think it's already familiar enough of a subject to both of those groups because of what they've seen, read, heard, whatever. We should make sure we've distributed the plan to them so they can distribute their constituency, and then somebody just show up at each of those meetings and say, okay, we just want a little bit of feedback from you as a group. And take
Right.
but
10
that's what I'm
minutes.
asking, what, are we giving them the draft that was?
it's a public draft. They
That's
have-
all we have right now. I mean, so yes,
So nothing else will be incorporated
it's a stake in the,
into-
it's a stake in the ground right now. And unfortunately, we need to collect a lot of feedback, which we're on path to try to do, and then there will likely be a revision, certainly prior to the 25th, right?
So you just said, Dave, that we want to meet with everybody who wants to meet with us, to listen. So that, anyway, so why are we reaching out to places like Founders Hall, for example?
Yeah,
The big senior population at Founders Hall.
right,
Why don't we reach out to people who live at Ballard Green, for example?
yeah,
Why
Sounds
aren't we
good.
reaching out to women's club, men's club, the civic organizations,
Right.
Rotary Club? So why are we leaving it up to just?
Well, I-
Anyone else,
the
it doesn't-
FCC, DTC?
I mean, I think, I'll comment myself, it's two important constituencies, two political constituencies, and this is a political issue. So the notion is, if the League of Women Voters wanted to come us, to have somebody talk about it, then we ought to send somebody over.
But it's gonna be, well, we have to limit it somehow, because if it's 90 minutes.
Oh, no,
It's
no,
no,
but
but
my
not
point is, it's
they
not
will
90
give
minutes.
us, they'll give us 10 minutes on their
Right,
agenda, and
right.
maybe another 5
Yeah.
minutes for Q&A. That's it, they have full agendas, they're just,
And frankly, if Dave, you or whoever offer it to them and they say, we don't need that, then that's fine. It's just the notion that says, if you as a constituency would like to share input to us, we're all ears. But I wouldn't make it, and I think it's not this, it can't be this long presentation, or you couldn't get through it within less than, an hour's
it's
worth
just, it's a
of
brief,
time.
it's a brief talk
I don't
and
know,
Q&A.
business, but you said business become political. Why is it become business political? We're doing a draft of the plan required by state. Why is it a political issue?
I think there are strong views held by constituencies, and I think both of our, primary parties hold views on this. And, I'd like to hear it more formally. And maybe you can argue we have already,
Yeah.
but it's just a forum to do that. If they say, look, our agendas are full, we don't have time, we know enough about it already, then that's fine.
Right, we should also do like an information session at Founders Hall and maybe the library, for example. Library has tons of people.
It's possible we can. One of the constituencies I interviewed in 2019 was Founders Hall. And I had a conversation there, and, as you might expect, not surprisingly, we could use more senior housing, and affordable senior housing. Now, sometimes affordable meant $500,000, not $1.5 million. So affordable is still in your own definition, right? But yes, we could offer that. I don't think we're going to hear anything that would surprise us. I think with what we've just talked about with another outreach to the community, in addition to the survey that everyone was offered, they now have one more chance to provide specific input. But we're not trying to, repopulate everything and act like we're starting from fresh and saying what constituencies might want to do it. It was just Dave's suggestion, and I think it's a good one, that we reach out to those two groups.
But what about the independent party, the independents in the town, out further away, the runs of Deborah House?
Well, the independent party doesn't outweigh, the unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated people in the town.
Right, the unaffiliated people are by definition not affiliated, so they don't
So
have meetings.
there was
But we
there was
have
the-
an opinion.
They don't
Look, it's the responsibility of this committee
Right.
to share the plan with as many people as possible. It's my job as chairman of the committee to speak to people and to promote the plan, to promote people learning about it, to promote engagement. Now, it's not my understanding that I need to seek the authorization of the committee every time I do that, but I will if that's what you want. But, I mean, it's normal in a situation like this for us to go out and say to everybody, here's what the plan is about, learn as much as you can, ask questions, come be heard, So, that's why I reached out to the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town
So
Committee.
maybe we should have them have an information session for the group in town too.
We're having
Well,
public information.
We have public information sessions, so we don't have, it's not that there's an unaffiliated meeting that we would go to and make a presentation. This is just that we're asking to get on their agenda. I intend to reach out, with your permission, to the Association of Religious Communities in town to talk about doing, coming to their meeting and talking to them for a few minutes.
Is that the Ridgefield Clergy Association?
I'm sorry, the Ridgefield,
Clergy.
right, ARC is in Denver, Ridgefield Clergy
Yeah, that's-
Association, thank you.
The Farms Hall Library also should be
Yeah.
considered.
Well, the library, I mean, who would we be talking to?
Have an information session there.
Well, but we're having two other information sessions.
Maybe we should have it there. Instead of here.
Have as many as you can.
Have as many as you can.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hold that and we can move that we have a third session. My question is, do I need to be authorized to talk? Because I saw somebody had posted a complaint that I had spoken to the press without running it by the committee first. It's not my understanding that I need to run it by the committee before I do that, it's just part of my job as chairman, but if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it.
Well, I think if you're talking on behalf of us,
Yes,
then yes.
Yeah, I heard that.
okay,
Because,
so that's a
you're giving the
motion.
opinion of the committee. It's a discussion, you're giving the opinion of the committee, but that might not necessarily be true.
Well, but I think maybe I'm wrong, but I
I
think
just-
the primary purpose of this is to ask for an existing body of information that almost everybody has had some chance to look at, or will if they haven't, to have Dave or someone else attend it and say, what do you think? What's your reaction?
Oh, no, I'm talking about interviews or things of that nature,
Well-
not going to RTC or
Okay, all right.
DTC. But I think we should know, I think the committee should know these things are happening
Well, we just
on
talked
our
about it.
behalf.
Well, I mean, I get called by the press all the time, or I used to when they covered us. Am I not supposed to talk to them or answer their questions and say, let me have a special meeting first?
No, but I think we could be aware of it. That was, we didn't even know this was coming. We didn't know.
I didn't either, she interviewed me, I didn't know when.
I know, but she interviewed, and we didn't know. So this was,
Everyone on the committee?
So,
if it's on behalf of us, like if you're talking on behalf of the committee, our
But Lauren,
opinions,
he was
how
talking
we.
on behalf of a plan that we all gave our feedback on, so it was
Would you all
nothing
agree?
new. It was just
all right, there is no motion on the floor, would you like to make a motion
Yes, I
that?
would like to make a motion
Go
that
ahead.
if interviews are granted, that we know what's going into those interviews, or at least that that they happened.
Okay, so what is the motion then? That if there is an interview, that what or if there's a request for an interview, what?
Did you see the, did she send me the interviews, article back, what is it? Did she send you the article?
Never,
No, journals don't do that.
never.
So I see a distinction between making comments as a member or the chair of the committee on the one hand, versus making a comment that purports to speak for the committee, to be the
Well,
committee's
wait, well,
position.
let's wait till there's a motion that we can,
Well, I'm trying to, I think that
Yes,
that would be
that's.
beneficial to clarify
he's
what a
on-
motion would be.
That's exactly what I'm trying to
So-
say. If it's on behalf, but if you're speaking on behalf of us as a committee,
Yeah, so I think that, what, I feel free to speak to whoever I want to, and
Right.
say, I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee, this is what I think, and I know that you all do too, and the same should go for Dave. I think that there's probably room for a discussion about speaking and conveying the committee's position, which is different.
yes, that's the difference.
but if I'm speaking to somebody, I would naturally convey the committee's position, wouldn't I?
If the committee's taken one, I guess is sort of the point of this.
Well,
Well, I mean, at present, until it changes, the committee's position, for what it's worth, is as was documented in the draft. I mean, it made a set of specific recommendations. Those recommendations may change before it's final, right? But right now, I mean, there were some recommendations to ask zoning to open up the aperture to do some things. Zoning may get back to us, and we may conclude in 5 days that, boy, that, we've striking that from the,
Yeah, I think we
from the
should-
proposal.
Yeah, I think we should know about who we're going to talk to, like, if we're talking to RDC, DCC, we should know.
Well, those
about
are the only two that I think are specifically on the table, other than you said the
Yeah,
clerk.
but I didn't know,
I-
I didn't know we could go out and talk to people, because if that's the case, I have some people set up something at Pouch Hall, something at the library, something at the Res Club, Ridgefield Rotary Club, I can set up all these
Well,
meetings.
that,
Let's do
I
it.
think,
Because you said like the more the merrier, right? So let's offer an invitation, so what I got,
Great.
can we come out to your agenda?
Except that it's time consuming, and we, you know, are we gonna divide all those places up among all of us to go speaking on it?
Well, just the point is, you just wanted to get as much information out as possible.
yes,
So if we have a clean, concise message, then I'm happy to speak at meetings. I'm sure you are as well. I'm sure other people in the community are as well. So that if there's one single person, everybody can speak.
sure.
Excellent point.
So, I just feel like, I feel like things like, I'm thinking, probably that groups should be run by us first. And we should agree to that they should be.
Okay, yeah, so,
Because we are a committee.
right. Would you like to make a motion?
That no one person on a committee can write a letter or interview and speak as a member of the committee, stating that they are speaking on behalf of of our committee on issues. That's, I shouldn't be able to go out and say, the committee believes. This is what the committee wants. That's not my place. I don't think that's any of our places to speak for all of us.
And
If
I-
we're gonna do something
Right.
like that, we should.
And I don't I don't disagree with you at all, but I think there have been some draft proposals and recommendations put in place. I think it would be fine to say, by the way, here's the one
Here's the
related to
draft.
planning and zoning, here's what the draft proposal is, what do you think about it,
Right.
you know?
and also, and you can say, and my view as a member of the committee on the draft plan,
Right.
X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Exactly,
I may support it or I may not.
right. But I
But-
think there's a difference when.
I agree. Well,
One of us comes out and says, on
Right.
behalf of the committee, you're
But
the chairman.
absolutely.
It seems
And-
like it's on behalf of the
And
committee.
we can't represent the draft as, this is the final definitive work. That's never what the draft was intended to be. It was intended to be a draft. It still is. And it will be until, you know, frankly, it will be until the selectmen agree to what the final document is, right? That they choose to submit to the state. But, yeah, I have no problem with what you suggested, but I think we've been operating, I personally think we've been operating that way, but.
Yeah, I mean, if the committee does something like the plan is the work of the committee.
No question.
So let's just get the motion made and seconded, and then we can debate it, so I follow the rules of order.
Want me to read it?
Please can you read the motion back?
What I have, I hope this is correct, that Lori made a motion that no one member of the committee can write a letter or do an interview, making a statement on behalf of the committee. Is that correct? I have like
Yes,
5 versions, I'm sorry, is
Yes.
that right?
yes.
Is there a second? Discussion.
Who seconded?
Deborah?
Deborah?
All right, I'll say, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, if you wanna go through that and tell me what was objectionable in that article, it's pretty clear that I'm speaking in my role as the chairman of the committee, and I think I'm pretty careful not to put my words in somebody else's mouth. So I'm not entirely certain what I'm supposed to do with
Because
this.
you were speaking on a document that the committee
Yes, and approve.
presented, so I'm confused as well, to be
I
honest.
think it goes back to communication. We're a committee, and we do things together.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That was I don't agree,
Or could we
and
have-
that's fine, we could,
Well, we do
can
things
debate
as a
that, that's
committee,
fine.
but as the chair, I have certain responsibilities that are separate from what goes on at the
But Dave,
meetings.
I don't think, to be honest, with what this motion is, I don't think maybe I don't know it word for word, I don't think there's anything in that document that, would be contrary to this motion.
No, but I
I'm
can
not
think,
laying it on one thing.
No, I know, but I mean,
It's the overall-
but let's just
Yes.
specifically on that, I mean,
Right.
he was interviewed, the press asked him for some information, and he gave input and responses to questions.
I guess another way we could do it is to say, as a committee, can we allow Dave, as the chairman of our committee, to, if he qualifies it on our behalf of the committee, to go ahead and grant interviews with the press.
But
That's
no
my
place,
job
did-
as
but
the
no place
chair.
did he say on behalf of the committee, I mean, that wasn't the case.
And I'm
Yes,
not
I-
laying it on this.
I know you're not,
Yeah.
I've just used that as an example. I don't think anything about that was was contrary to the motion that you're making. I don't know how important the motion is from the perspective of, is it actually changes behavior, because I don't think Dave has ever taken the latitude to speak on our behalf. He's never done it for me. But, and maybe some of you feel that he has for you, but I don't feel that about comments that he's made. But the fact of the matter is, we should all speak as members of the committee, but not for the committee.
Yes.
Dave is a more important member of the committee because he's the chairman of the committee. And
That's
all the
not true
truth.
at all.
So, I see
Shouldn't
the
be.
motion as confirming what I hope we all understand of the way that we've all been. So I don't see it as a motion, as a referendum on this particular newspaper.
Or particularly on changing behavior, but just a reminder that no one speaks on behalf of the entire committee until the entire committee agrees
Agrees on it, absolutely.
that this is our unified position, and we haven't come to that point yet. It's like the discussion that took place in the last public meeting. Did everybody vote on this? No, we haven't brought it to that level yet because we're dealing with a draft document that was a lot of different inputs, and at some point in time, I hope we get to the point that we say this is the recommendation of the committee. It may be because it's a recommendation of the committee, 6-3 or 4-5 or whatever the number is, but, that's what our goal would be.
Sometimes I wonder, we spend so much time discussing the semantics of communication, when, instead of discussing some of the meatier things that need to be talked about within the document.
Oh, yeah.
We spend like 90% of our time talking about how to talk about it, and only 10% of what's actually in the document. And so then we miss some things that would have been good to discuss at greater length.
Well, I don't disagree, Krista, but that's where we are. And again, I guess I would say, if there's any member of this committee that doesn't like the way something is phrased in this document, because they wholeheartedly object to it, then provide that feedback specifically to the people that are gathering that input, and that should be a discussion of our future meeting. But it's gotta be tangible, it's gotta be, I don't like this way this is worded. I want it to say, X versus Y. And then we can have that discussion. We gotta get it to that point. But I've honestly not heard any of those yet. I haven't heard anybody around this table say, I wholeheartedly object to, the recommendation that was made. And if you do, then, and you haven't said it yet, that's fine. Then let's get that on record and let's discuss it at our next meeting.
Yeah, but I might have a few things I'd like to refine in the, I mean,
Yes, of course.
like the big points, but there are some things that
Oh, yeah.
I,
Okay, well,
or I'd like to, steer the focus to a few things.
But I still think we should vote on who we talk to as a group, like the RTC, DCC, North Hall. You should know about that. You should find out about that from friends.
I mean, and personally, I don't care if we talk to RTC or TTC. It doesn't, it was a suggestion, I don't think it's an inappropriate one, because I think they are important constituencies that, have forums, but if it didn't happen, it certainly wouldn't offend
Are
me.
we switching now, or are we back to the?
No, sticking to the motion at hand, which is nobody on the committee should purport to speak for the committee without the committee's
Right, so let's vote on it.
Except that what happens when we have these, talks with the library and the Democratic Committee? Are we speaking on behalf of the committee?
Well, to me, at this point in time, you'd be representing what is in the draft plan. And that is what is out there, and you should be saying, this is what the recommendation says. Any feedback, any comments or
Agree or
input?
disagree?
Right. It's
not
not
our-
like this
it's
is
not my
it
personal
shouldn't be
opinion.
presented as this is the definitive and final work, and do you have any questions? No, it should be, this is where we're at, and we're still in the phase of soliciting input.
So if you go to those meetings,
So sorry.
if you go to those meetings,
Pardon me?
are they gonna be,
Sorry.
are you asking people to email you with, put definitive points on the plan, or collecting information?
I mean, from the committee?
No, if you go to these meetings, the FTC, DTC, North Hall, wherever they are you going to be collecting, what do you advise them
We'll
to
be
do?
taking notes, of course.
What do you advise them to do? To speak to, have them send you emails with what their feedback is, or what's the?
No, it would be a 10-minute talk about the plan and 5 minutes of Q&A. Probably 15 minutes is what they usually give you on the agenda. 20 minutes if they're feeling generous.
So somebody will be taking notes then, from the committee, to be shared with the committee.
Sure,
So that means that 2 people have to go?
I can take notes as I talk, but if anybody wants to come, of course, they're welcome to come.
But I mean, as a point, you can't make, like, as an example, I'm sure you have plans to go, you would plan to go to the Democrat Town Committee meeting. You said, and I can't make the Republican Town Committee, so if anybody even goes, it's somebody else around this table, maybe somebody who routinely attends it. Can just be there to say, hey, you've heard all the things, you've seen a lot of things, can I answer any questions for you? I mean, that to me, because you're not gonna get any more time on one of those meetings than that kind of thing. And hopefully the feedback is concise and to the point, and if somebody goes, they can come back and say, hey, here's what I learned.
So I was just trying to understand the purpose of how the issues would be collected and so forth, trying to understand what.
Well, these are not like, these are not input gathering sessions, these are presentations, and just a little bit of Q&A. So, but we'll, anybody who has something important to say, of course, will take notes.
And of course, wrapping it up by encouraging them just a bit to that email if they have specific comments.
Right.
Because that way it's
Yeah,
accountable.
the email is
Right.
important.
Yeah.
And when we have the email, do we have the document in a public, is it
Yes,
gonna be
it's
attached
on
to
the
the email?
website.
Oh, it's on the website?
What's on the website?
The document.
The Affordable Housing Grant.
Right, I dropped the document to fill out the, are you saying, are they providing
The
the
plan,
content
yeah.
for the plan, for feedback, or?
No, I mean the plan.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
All right, well, we've got a motion on the table. Should we
There's a
vote on it?
motion. The motion is, please read it back, Cheryl.
The motion is that no member of the committee can write a letter or do an interview making a statement on behalf of the committee. Is that correct?
Without the committee's approval.
Okay. And I actually want to comment about that too. Hold on. Without the committee's approval. I just think, we're all in agreement that nobody should be speaking on behalf of the whole committee. We've all agreed that. I think the idea of taking it one step further and making a motion on something we all agree on is really, to me, it's a very slippery slope in that we're just looking to have somebody violate that. You know, that we're all in agreement, if somebody does violate that, the committee knows and can, you know, act on it without having a formal motion. It's just not clear to me what intent there is to, you know, what purpose there is to actually having a motion beyond the fact that we've all just discussed it. It's a great point, Lori, and we've all agreed on it. I'm just not sure why it goes any farther than that, what the positive side of doing that is.
I agree with that.
I don't disagree with you, but
Yeah.
just to move things forward, we've got a motion on the table. You know, and I think the effect of the motion is rather benign, because we've all agreed to operate in that fashion, but.
Then I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, well,
Motion withdrawn. Thank you.
okay, very good.
I think it's happened on all three ones.
Can I make a motion about the DTC and RTC? Are we looking for one without them?
What do
Or
you,
we don't?
RTC and DTC.
Because I know we keep going back and forth between those two issues. Do we need a motion for the DTC and RTC presentations, or, I don't want a public presentation, yeah.
well, okay, so, did somebody want to make a motion that nobody can present the plan without the approval of the committee? Because that's what I'm hearing then.
I don't particularly want to, I wouldn't want to make that motion. If we're talking specifically about those two meetings, I mean, I think that appropriate members of the committee could reach out to each one of those constituencies and say, hey, would you like one of us to stop by and have 15 minutes on your agenda to give you a brief overview and ask for your input? They may say yes, they may say no.
And whatever the answer is, just shoot out an email to the committee and say,
Right.
this is when we're going.
Right,
This is who we're going to.
Right. And right now-
And the problem, of course, is then once it becomes a discussion, then you're in violation of the FOIA regulations.
No, you're just making a statement.
what becomes a discussion, Dave, I'm sorry.
If there is an email that is a discussion of committee business,
Oh, I see, right,
it's a
yeah.
FOIA violation.
No, if you go ahead and secure a meeting with DTC and RTC on certain dates, all you have to do is just send it out to the committee saying, these are the dates that we're having
It's a
these.
notification.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, notification.
FYI.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, we should all be rowing in the same direction here,
Exactly.
trying to get this plan out to as many people as possible. And I can't understand why we would put barriers up for doing that.
Because
I don't think that's
All
a
right.
barrier, it's
people
just communication.
may have other ideas in addition to RTC and DTC, like finish off.
Then let's do that. Let's, by all means, let's do that. All right.
Does that bring us to number 2 on the agenda?
Yes, it brings us to number 2, unless there's anything else on the affordable housing plan. All right, so the other thing is,
Sorry, so if we have wording for it, a plan, so for example, our last ministry meeting, I talked about the survey results and what those in the plan. What are we talking?
all right, you want to make a motion to put all of the survey results into the plan?
I guess my point is, I might call it, like Ken said, bring all the stuff that you don't want to talk about, and I've got stuff here.
Okay,
This is gonna get enough time to, all the stuff I want to discuss with the committee, to potentially add to the plan. So are we having, so how do we move forward with that? I guess?
what is it that you want to give us stuff to put into the
No, I
plan?
guess what I'm saying is that, like, for example, the survey, I went through the survey, and the survey, it's very, like, some questions have very little input, so for example, like, for example, when we say that, people, so if you have others beside, other adults living in their home, such as children or elderly relatives or not related adults.
Mhm.
This says, if they answer yes and answer no, the 24% answer yes, 75% answer no. So like that, then you'll ask us to say, if yes, are they sharing your residence because others reasons they cannot afford to homestead in Ridgefield? you said that, was 175 answered yes, and 738 people skipped the question. So what are the things like that? What's
Well, they skip the question because they don't have somebody living with them.
Okay, but I think that those results, so for example, they're considering moving, if yes, are they considering moving to Ridgefield? Yes or no? Again, another skip. So why wouldn't they just answer the question instead of skipping it? Same thing with this, the only members who want to reside in Ridgefield, what's their preferred form of housing? 444, answer the question, 469.
Okay.
It's not, we shouldn't, they should be included for those reasons alone, because it gives you the true picture of the actual survey and how it.
I mean, my own reaction, I think we've talked about this before, is if there's data that needs to be appended to the plan, I think that is fine. My concern is the plan itself today is whatever, 46 pages long. And if we try to say, here's another 20 pages of stuff we're gonna stick right in the middle of it and ask you to read this, we're not trying to hide anything. If Deborah, if there's a point in there that it is not been made in the plan that's relevant, then suggest that it be put in the plan. I'd even be so far as to say, look, if there's a strong feeling that the entire survey should be embedded into the plan and make it 96 pages versus 46 pages, or whatever it is, then we should ask the Board of Selectmen, when you submit the plan, would you like that survey to be part and parcel of it, with the implication that everybody read through every detail, or would you like it as appended data?
Well, it was always our intention, which is the way you would do it and the way we did it last time around with this, is you summarize the data and highlights in the plan, and then you would put it in the appendix so that
Exactly.
people who want to read the whole thing.
Exactly.
And I understand you object to that.
So, when you ask somebody, they talk about a lot about people can't work in Ridgefield because they can't afford to live here. So, somebody asked you, do you have anyone who's a household that lives in Ridgefield? So the 173 answers, I thought 739 responses, 173 answered yes, and then 237 answered no. And then there was another 175 that said they work remotely from home. And I imagine that number should increase, that should really be counted as people working Ridgefield. People working Ridgefield from home aren't really people who work in Ridgefield.
Deborah, this survey, we put this survey together a long time ago and everybody had input into this survey.
Right.
We got the results a long time ago, and you know, we've had them for a while to look at and use, so I'm not understanding what it is. Are you asking now that we keep it out of the plan?
I'm saying
Or
that
we put the whole thing into the plan, or are you disagreeing with some of the questions?
I'm
or
saying that this representation of this question doesn't necessarily drive a point home and say that people work and want to live in Ridgefield.
Okay. Well, what would you like us to do, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think that questions that aren't answered with enough representation really shouldn't be included in the plan. Or they should just be, they should be included, but these answers should be included in the plan if they don't have enough, answers to them.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Can somebody repeat that? I was having trouble.
There's not a motion. Deb, why don't you? Deborah was saying, for questions where we don't have a high number of answers, we should not include those in the plan. I mean, we can talk to Glenn, who managed that for us, and ask what he thinks. I don't mind doing that.
Let's do that.
We need to vote on that?
I think we should just put on record that we're going to be talking to
Okay.
Can I answer that? Because I'm a statistics person. If you have a low number of answers, it means that you need to have a greater difference to have significance. So that's something that can be incorporated into the narrative, that this percent on or whatever, this number, however was based, it can be incorporated. You just take into account that, I mean, these are all small numbers compared to the town of Ridgefield. So, the lower the number, the less reliability there is to unique.
We said
So
one.
that it's not valid information.
we said one response per household, and assuming that's what people did, which we can't assume, that would represent roughly 10% of the households, but we don't know. This is not a thoroughly scientific survey because we don't have a huge pool of respondents, and we also don't have a huge pool of people to survey, so our confidence level is gonna be lower, but
I
they
think
do.
it makes sense, I'll talk to Glenn, like you said.
We'll talk to Glenn, okay.
So Michelle, we're gonna talk to Glenn
We'll talk
about
to
his
Glenn.
guidance on the questions that, which, like the ones that do not allow participation, how to handle those in the past with other committees.
Okay, is there anything else on that, or can we move on?
I just wanted to say that, one of the things I happen to do, because like we talked about the West Cloud plan quite a bit,
Yes.
and then I took the liberty of kind of like pointing out the fact that a bunch of, our kind of Boston towns have, wrote annexes to the West Cloud plan, so one of them is Wilton, the other one is Reading, New Canaan is one. New Canaan, Newfield is one, and Ridgefield, Newtown, and Sherburne. So there's eight towns that have gone this route.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm just wondering if we should maybe take take a look at this process and maybe add it as an annex to the Westcott plan.
Well, we can annex our whole plan to the West Cotton plan.
What is that, Deborah? Those are opinions that,
These are
No.
these are the affordable housing plans that they've submitted to the state.
well, they've already,
But they're
they
using,
submitted it.
Are they the ones that Westcog basically did?
they've attached it to the Westcott regional plan.
Right.
Well, what we have, towns that did not want to go through the process of doing their whole plan, WestCog put together a plan, even though it's more of a data, like a data analysis, 135 pages. And then every town was invited to submit their own annex.
Can I see that?
Yeah, sure.
And they're pretty thin, is my observation of them, having read most of them, whereas we've done, I think, a pretty substantial job to create a plan that's much more tailored to the
Yeah.
town.
One of the things I noticed in their plans is that they reference the fact that they need to work regionally as committees to accomplish certain goals.
Mhm.
So for example, like in the case of, which one, there was a certain town that didn't have the infrastructure to support affordable housing, so that they're hoping that the regional plan would help develop the relationship to create that partnership to accomplish that. There's some other points that were interesting as well. So I just thought it would be interesting to take a look at those and maybe see if because there are a couple things that popped out at me that I found some great ideas that we had thought of in our plan.
Great.
So I think it's just a good information session, looking at it, learning from other plans next door, like Wilton, what they've done and how they're pursuing it and how they're referencing Westcott plan with their plan.
How did you get these?
They're all available on Westcott's site.
Do you have all of those on your computer as PDFs?
I can
If
get
you
them.
can just send them to everybody?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
I
On
just,
camera, whoever's the cameraman.
Oh, low battery?
Battery, 20%.
Yeah, well, just press OK, whatever it is.
you know, I guess the last point I want to make is that.
Just close.
I guess the last point I want to make is that, like, there's been a lot of uproar about affordable housing. And I think that affordable housing, it's up to us to clarify affordable housing, that people may be confused about it. So for affordable housing is affordable housing. Then there's assisted housing, or government subsidized housing. They're two very different things. And affordable housing is like Steve Zemo apartments, that's affordable housing. Grant housing, those are government assisted housing. So I think that when people hear the word affordable housing, they think one or the other. And they don't realize that there's a very big difference between the two. And we probably need to do a better job communicating that, so people avoid all the, like, people on Facebook saying one thing or another.
Well,
Misinformation, as you call it, you say misinformation.
Yeah, it's pretty clear in the plan that there's two kinds of affordable housing. There's government assisted, and then there's set-aside housing.
Right,
So I think that's pretty clear in the plan. I think we made it clear during the meeting, and we will continue to make that clear.
yeah, but it seems to me like some people are concerned about the fact that Prospect Ridge is government assisted housing. It's positioned that way.
As it is now, yes.
Yes.
It's called assisted housing, yes.
Right, assisted housing means government subsidized housing. Yes.
Right, in one, like a Chaffa mortgage
Right.
would be considered, if that's quasi-governmental, but yeah.
That's subsidized
Right.
housing.
Mhm.
So we have to just make that clear, because that plan is government subsidized housing, the Prospect Ridge plan is. And that complex, as I see it, is not eligible for everybody. Like, just not everybody could afford that housing, because you guys do need a certain income threshold. So people say, we're trying to say, what I'm saying is, we talk about affordable housing for all. It's really not for all, because that project itself is for a certain income level. Right, so we wanna, when we talk about certain things, we wanna make it clear to the public that, this is government assisted housing, and this income, this would be income qualifications. If you talk to Zero's apartments, the income qualifications of this, that rate would be much higher. So I guess the different levels are, but maybe confusing people, and I think it's up to us to help.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a clarification, so people don't
Right.
panic.
It's a good point, to make sure that's really clear, because I think people do assume.
So Deborah, do you want to
Something
suggest some language, some changes to the wording of the plan, and we can take that in with all the other feedback we're gonna be
Yeah, I mean, I
getting?
think that when we say affordable housing, we have to say either affordable housing as it relates to E3G, or affordable housing as it relates to government assisted housing.
I think there's a lot of different terms for it, and we use a lot of different terms,
We will
but there
make
really
sure
are only two.
To make it very clear
Mhm.
what we mean. And it's in here, but we'll make it clear if we need to, and in the meetings we can make it
Does
clear.
that make sense though? I mean,
Maybe it has
Yeah.
something like,
Yeah.
really just definitions,
yeah,
Yeah,
section that says
Sure.
definitions.
because.
Well, basically, affordable housing is the umbrella term.
Yeah.
We just need to get more specific.
Because if we look at,
Because we need an umbrella term, we can't have a whole, affordable housing.
yeah, so the question I have is, like, we always talk about seniors. So this was the presentation that Dave presented for
Right.
Foster Ridge. So if we talk about the huge points that are needed, it's 1.5 per unit, does it necessarily kind of senior?
this is for the moratorium.
No, this is Foster Ridge.
With,
That's our Jennifer.
right, but this was in terms of the points that you get
Right,
towards the moratorium.
okay.
Those are they're called housing equivalent
Right.
unit points.
But these were, this 70 numbers of the units we're actually talking about for Prospect Ridge. This was from the Prospect Ridge presentation that you did.
That was the initial presentation, right?
Right, but this 1.5 per unit in one bedroom wouldn't necessarily represent a senior. In the way I view it.
No, senior, you get half, if it's restricted to seniors, you get half a point unless 40% or less is seniors, in which case you get 0.75 points.
Right, so
But-
I guess I'm confused about,
Okay,
And
but
they're confused
this
about-
isn't, is this relevant to what we're talking about now?
well, it's relevant in the sense that gets to further my point about assisted living versus affordable housing.
Okay. And we absolutely will be talking about that, but if you want to put that on the agenda, we can, but this was more about how we get to the finish line. And I think that's more about sort of the content of the plan. But we'd be happy, and that certainly will come up when we're talking about editing the plan. Is there anything else on the affordable housing plan before we move on to ARPA funding?
Actually, I have, I don't know when I made it, but there were two women, old women, very old women out in the parking lot when I came here.
Yeah.
They had me, bloggers, they were safe to come in, they had masks on outside because they're elderly, and they're given the current infection rates. They wanted,
Okay, do you want this read into the record?
yes,
Okay, we'll do that when we start public comment.
okay,
Great.
thanks.
Anything else on the plan? All right. So the formal request for ARPA funding if we want, we're in line, but we're not formally in line because we haven't made a formal request. We have asked about asking for ARPA funding, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of people in line, there's a slim chance of getting it, but we won't get considered unless we ask. My original thought was to ask for money to seed the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which could then be used for something like, you know, this sort of the Second Sunrise Cottage or whatever else the administrators of the Housing Trust Fund think we should do. So, I would like to be able to write a letter to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance formally requesting money to be allocated to seed the Housing Trust Fund. And
Through ARPA.
And that, Dave, hasn't that already been an informal discussion at
It's
least?
been an
It
informal-
It was raised to the Board of Selectmen, I thought, in a meeting.
yes, but it needs to be raised formally.
I understand.
We don't have a housing trust fund, so,
No, we don't.
There's a proposed housing trust.
Right.
right, but we don't have one officially. It could take a minute to get it approved, right?
Could
But what do we do with the money if they give it to us?
set it aside for the Housing Trust Fund.
I mean, I don't have a philosophy for money for a plan, so I've been creating that for personally, that's fine. I thought the philosophy for it to help build, Halpin Lane, but I don't feel.
Right, but we don't have a plan to build Halpin Lane either at this point. So it's just that we have to get on the radar for this issue.
I personally, I think there's so many funds vying for it, right? So many sources vying for those funds. I think it's a long shot
It is.
that we get it. However, I personally don't think that it is a problem if a request is made, even though it is, you know, still for an entity that's not fully defined, and it's asked for a set aside as part of seed money, as Dave suggested. Is it gonna get a lot of traction? If I was a betting person, I'd say no, but if you don't ask, you got no chance.
Right.
So,
So what I'm asking is for permission to write a letter to ask for it.
in what amount?
Well, I think I had originally said 500,000, but we put on the table whatever.
My question, I guess,
Sorry? If they don't know what ARPA is, what are they doing here? The ARPA is what's the American Rescue Plan
If they don't know.
app, that's money that's been allocated to the towns. Ridgefield was allocated a bunch of money and has been trying to figure out what to do with it. We have a member of the Board of Selectmen here, if you'd like to clarify a little more.
Yeah, I would be happy to. Bob Hebert for the record, Board of Selectmen. We received $7.6 million in ARPA funding in the American Rescue Plan. It was, actually received $3.6 million about a year ago. We will be getting the balance of approximately $3.6 million within the next, month or so. The first 3.6 million has already been allocated. And there's approximately $800,000 that's remaining. At this point, we may pick up a little bit more, but.
In the first tranche.
I'm sorry?
In the first tranche.
No, in the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
There's only that we will be we will allocate approximately 800,000 plus or minus. Okay, that I don't have that number locked in yet. And the money has to be used for COVID-related expenses. So I don't know how the trust fund would be COVID-related.
How's the sewer?
That's infrastructure. So it could be used for the infrastructure, it could be used for, but it's, like a loss of revenue, which we did use $1.5 million of it. But it has to be, COVID related. There's very specific
Or
guidance.
infrastructure related?
I'm sorry?
Or infrastructure related?
Infrastructure, yeah, we can use it for, roads, things that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to, like I said, loss of revenue and other things. There will be money that Well, most likely, it hasn't been done yet, I shouldn't even say most likely, but one of the considerations is the arts, the arts district. They requested money, they may get some.
And how is that COVID related or infrastructure related?
Loss of revenue. Okay, so,
Got it.
but,
What's your own opinion, Bob, in terms of the likelihood of a request of this nature getting much of any
Make sure
consideration?
you can define how this is
Right.
COVID related, because otherwise I'm gonna give you a 0 probability.
Right.
If you can show that
Document
it's
it's COVID.
COVID related, but,
Great,
and it falls under the guidance or the rules of, that we've been given.
And how much time do you think we would have yet to make that request before requests are not going to be taken? Because I'm not sure we can decide it tonight, is my question. Is it like, time is of the essence, or?
Time is of the essence. The subcommittee of Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Ed, we're meeting again next week to kind of determine the framework for the remaining plus or minus 800,000, how that will be distributed. And then what'll happen, it'll go to the Board of Finance, and then it'll go to a referendum, like our town meeting, for a vote.
Thank you.
thank you, Bob.
Dave, you have to me, it doesn't seem simple to make it, infrastructure-like thing or directly COVID related, but do you have a thought in terms of how that can be done?
Yeah, I would like a motion to allow me to draft a letter for consideration by the committee to send to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
So further consideration of the committee, so in other words, you drafted.
I draft the letter for
And-
further consideration by the committee, to send to.
But in that, then you would then characterize how you believe it is
Yeah.
COVID related or infrastructure. So the committee's gonna get a chance to look at what you
Oh, yeah, yeah.
propose.
Yeah, well, we have to have a special meeting pretty soon anyway to start dealing with all of the stuff, so it would probably then
Right, okay. Personally, I think if it can be characterized, if a legitimate case can be made, then you ought to have a chance to draft it, and the committee should have a chance to review it. I don't see what harm there is in that. I'm not sure that we're highly likely to get funds. I'm not sure that it's easy to make a case that fits in any of those, but my view is if you want to take a shot at it, you're probably the best person to do it, and we'll all get a chance to look at it before it would go forward.
Is there a motion?
Are you saying, just to be clear, he said for the housing trust fund, correct?
To the Housing Trust Fund, yeah.
So you're asking specifically for the housing trust fund?
Yes.
Yeah,
What would happen to that money, I'm sorry, what would happen to that money if we got it? And we don't have a housing trust fund, and that's not,
Soon it will be reallocated.
where? Like, does it stay within the committee? Does it go
No.
out to the?
It's called a slush fund.
After a while, what did that impact?
Gets the interest?
My own opinion is I'll make a motion that we allow Dave to draft a letter for the committee's consideration to request ARPA funding. I don't know where it's gonna go from there. The committee has to review it. I think we would all have to agree that it is logical, that it's, that it makes sense before, so I'm, the net of it is I'm not suggesting that the motion is the agreement that we send the letter.
No.
It's just the agreement that he has the opportunity to draft it and propose it.
Yeah, I don't agree.
It's just before there's discussion, is there a
Okay.
second?
Is there a second?
Do we need a motion for
Cheryl
you to draft
second.
a letter and circulate it to us?
Yes.
Then I second.
Okay.
Okay, Cheryl seconded it, actually. Discussion?
I just feel that because we don't have a housing trust fund in existence today, asking for something that we don't have to bring to doesn't make sense. That's just my opinion. Asking for something to somewhere that doesn't exist. But I think it's gonna be in place in a year or two, who knows, it may not be in place. So that's my own concern, asking for something that doesn't exist today.
And when Dave drafts the letter, we can you know,
I'm sorry,
look at those kind of things and
it's
say,
okay.
is it realistic, meaningful, likely?
But the money, what would we be taking the money from?
No, the money,
Somebody else.
the money would never come to this
actually
committee.
use it.
Right.
Would we be taking that money away from a community that maybe already has a housing trust fund that is in,
No, it's,
No,
No,
this
no,
is
it's
money that's
already, it's
going
already
to
coming to
Ridgefield.
Ridgefield.
okay.
It's already coming to Ridgefield. It's a matter of,
Are there other, like she says, are
Yeah.
there other places that already exist that could use
Like
it?
social services, for
Yeah,
example.
that's what I'm
well,
talking about.
I mean, my only thought, there's, I don't know how much funds are available yet exactly. There's gonna be 10 times of that in requests being
Yeah.
made, right? It's overspent, you know, many-fold over.
Right.
And all Dave is suggesting is, he has a chance to make a case on behalf of the committee to throw the hat in the ring. We may conclude that it's not worth it and we wouldn't support it, or we say he just had a magnificent idea and let's proceed and discuss it at our next meeting.
And the town may say, forget about it, or the town may say, you know what, we're gonna put $5,000 in.
Right.
Or they may say, you know what, you can have all of the $800,000.
And they get totally different things to say, no, that's just because I agree that we should have something that doesn't exist yet today.
Okay, so did you get Deborah's comment, Cheryl?
I did
That we
not.
should not be voting to allocate money to something that doesn't exist yet. Did I characterize that correctly? Okay.
That's logic.
Any more discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand.
Oh my God.
So it passes what? Oh,
We're in
Cheryl?
favor of your writing the letter.
Writing,
Just
writing,
writing the
drafting a
letter.
letter.
Right, and drafting a letter.
What did Cheryl vote?
All right, I need help. Who was for, who was against? Who's for?
Okay, for it, Sharon, Kent, Kevin, Dave.
And me.
Okay.
That's 5. All those opposed to it? Okay, that was Krista, Whit, Lori, oh, there goes my power, and Deborah.
Oh, bummer.
Motion passes.
Oh, okay, the motion passes 5-4. We're gonna have to talk fast. If somebody wouldn't mind recording the public comment, because we might lose, no, you can, hold on, please.
We can put it on my phone.
All right, so,
Hey, can you send the link to somebody else's phone?
yeah,
I'll send it to somebody. The invite. Did I
Okay.
send the invite to somebody?
so I'll forward it.
Or I can do it.
Krista, do you have good battery?
Oh, I thought I did. I don't. I'm not the right person.
Okay, send it to, do you have Lori? Can you-
Yeah.
Send it to Lori.
To Lori?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we're gonna stay on here until we lose you.
Yeah, and then she can switch over.
All right, so, public comment. Let me read these into the record. Did you have those for me?
I delivered it.
I just sent it, Lori.
Okay,
Got
these
it.
are the same, these two are the same.
These are from two members. Who-
Oh, okay. This is from, is this a different one?
Yes, we have a meeting with.
They wanted to share with their- So, this is, as I said,
Here's an extra.
there were two seniors from Ballard Green who were standing outside waiting for me to hand me this. Because they-
Okay,
they were
so this
couple-
is a letter from three residents of Ballard Green asking us not to add more housing to Ballard Green.
Nancy Higgins,
Nancy Higgins,
um,
Kuzin, I can't read that, Kusan Benson,
Christine Benson, and then Barbara.
K-U-R-S-A-N,
Christian, K-R-I-S-A-N-N. Christian.
Krisan, K-R-I-S-A-N-N, Benson,
And
B-E-N-S-O-N,
Barbara Blue,
and Barbara,
Blue,
how do you spell that? B-E-A,
U-L-I-U, Blue.
okay. We are writing to request that you remove Ballard Green expansion in section 11.1.1 as there is a wetland area, watercourse, stream, and a retention pond easement for the Victoria Gate condominiums in the woodland area. Wetlands are protected by state law. The Ballard Green community design, as is, should be held up as a model for developers to follow when designing new development for low-income and affordable housing in Ridgefield. Ballard Green was carefully and thoughtfully designed around the historical and environmental conditions on the site, from the bedrock to the inland wetlands to the ancient Chinese chestnut trees from the regional state and more. This property is a wonderful model on how to create a transition from the commercial zone to a residential zone. The plan to increase density on the property would destroy wildlife habitat, impair natural groundwater recharge and cleansing, as well as increase flooding to the abutting neighbors and other property owners downhill from the site. Please remove the Ballard Green property from your report, as there are more appropriate locations and solutions in Richmond. All right, other public comment? No hands?
What did they think are the more appropriate locations?
I don't know, that's not for us to discuss here, we'll just read this into the record. Yes,
Yeah.
go
Do I
ahead, please,
just
tell
speak
us your
from
name
here,
first.
or do I speak from here? Or
Speak
do I?
from there
I speak from here.
and tell us your name.
Okay, hi. Good evening, my name is Christine Moore, and I'm a resident of Ridgefield. I live on Scotts Ridge Road. I want to thank you all for your hard work. I recognize it's many, many hours, and I really appreciate it. I would like to say this is the first time that I've been to one of your official meetings. I was at the public meeting last Wednesday. But this is the first time I have witnessed the meeting. I have a lot of notes, but I will just say that I have, the first takeaway I'd like to express, a real strong concern about the tone in the meeting. And just the feeling that this is most definitely not a cohesive group that respects each other's opinions. It's not the feeling that I'm getting. The opinions of those who differ from the chair are just not received well. And I'd like to know, I sent a letter actually, I don't think I sent it to you, I sent it to the Board of Selectmen, just about the transparency in how this plan that you are submitting was developed. I have real concerns about that, and now that I've watched the interaction here, it's very clear to me. Also, the description of the chairperson as being more important than everyone else was very telling, because as a public school teacher, I've been on thousands of committees. I've been a chairperson, and I've been a member of committees and worked with the chairperson. Everyone's voice has always weighed the same. The chairperson's voice, in my opinion, shouldn't weigh more than the other members of the committee. And it seems to me that that is what happens here. That's my takeaway from the tone here. I understand it seems amusing, but that's my feeling.
Well, that was my comment, and I meant it not from the perspective of his voice counted more.
Oh, but that's what
I meant
you
it from
said.
the perspective that he is our leader
No,
and attempting.
he's not your leader, he's the chairperson.
Well, he's attempting
Okay.
to coordinate
You know what,
activities from a
it's-
lot of people.
Okay, understood.
That was what my intention was.
Understood, and I appreciate the clarification. I found it very telling, though. I wouldn't have written it down if it wasn't clear who takes charge here. It's very clear as to, you make decisions as to what becomes a motion, what doesn't become a motion, what goes in the minutes, what doesn't go in the minutes. It's very concerning to me. To have members of the committee not at all have access to interview questions, the interviews that were done, where is all the information for every single member of the committee? Because in my opinion, and as a taxpayer in this town, I appreciate all your hard work, but I would hope that every member's opinion is not just heard, it's okay, and then moved on. What are you going to do with that input? And I just have one other thing I'd like to request. I'd like to stress the importance of getting input from all the residents of this town and using it to shape any plan that's sent to the town. I'm very concerned that you waited until the 11th hour to get input from the town, and you've got this June date, which I know now it was June 1st, but now it's just going to be a little bit after that. I think you should place a hold on it until you really get more input. from the town. And Mr. Goldenberg made a statement last week about the importance of working with neighboring towns, which I wholeheartedly agree. So my question is, has the committee seen or shared plans for neighboring towns? I think Deborah shared it tonight, and you know, that would be a great way to work with neighboring towns. So I'm wondering if that's something that you've done, or, you know.
Well, at this point, every town has to come up with its own plan. Our plan does propose working with neighboring towns.
No, my question, I'm sorry, let me be more clear. Have you seen plans from neighboring towns, and have you looked at them and used, you know, kind of worked together so that?
Those are two different things. I'm
Okay.
happy to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of working with other towns in general, we've been trying to do that for a long time, and it's very difficult because every town works in its own little
Right.
silo, and nobody thinks regionally, and that's really hurting us when it comes to a place like Branchville. In terms of the plan itself, we're required on our own to make up our own plan specifically for the town of Ridgefield. But in our plan, we recommend working with adjacent communities.
Okay, my question really was more about, you know, the other neighboring towns, like Danbury, for instance, are they submitting a plan?
Every town has to submit a plan.
Right, so my question is, have you shared your plan with them, and have they shared their plans with you?
Well, our plan just became public.
Okay, So
and
have
the
you
others, as they're made public, we read them, yeah.
and have you like brought them to the committee and said, let's take a look at this, maybe we can use some of this? I guess I'm just concerned about your.
And I think I probably mentioned it in an email to the committee that they're worth reading.
Okay, I guess I'm concerned that you, you know, you made a statement that you said our plan is more representative of Ridgefield than forgive me, Deborah, I didn't know what you had presented.
The annex of the, explains for the attachments?
No, I said our plan is more substantial and tailored to Ridgefield.
Right, but you use the word representative, I think? You think that's, like, perhaps I'm wrong.
No, I think somebody else used that.
Okay, so I guess my question is, how confident are you that this draft is representative of all voices? Because the tone I get here is that if we disagree, or if anyone disagrees with the chairperson, it's not received well, and it's not really given as much weight as if you do agree with the chairperson.
Okay.
That is my concern.
Right. And that's your observation based on attending one meeting.
Absolutely. And the presentation that you unilaterally presented the other night, it was very concerning to me that none of the other committee members were part of that presentation at all. I didn't know who was on the committee. It was as if there was one person making that presentation. It was very concerning. Yeah, oh I know.
There was one person making the presentation.
Yeah.
The other committee members were here and we identified them.
And did they decide together that you were going to be the one to make the presentation?
Did they decide to
Did the committee, you all decide?
No.
Okay, and I guess, you know, that's one example of being, I don't know, it's concerning. It's concerning, and do you feel that you have gotten enough input from the town?
Well, we had a public input meeting to start it. We did a survey. We had a public input meeting. We did the survey. We did the interviews. We had a public meeting. We're going to have another public meeting, and we're going to have a public hearing. We're also going to be sending out an invitation to people to send written
Yes,
comments.
I heard that, I think that's
So if
great.
there's anything else you think we should be doing, I'd be very glad to listen to your suggestion.
That's wonderful, so you would take them into consideration?
Of course.
Okay, because I loved I have to stress that I loved, one of the bullet points that I felt was glossed over the other night was using existing structures. I think that should be number one, using existing structures. So if you're taking notes for this meeting, if somebody could write that down, I think that should be that should be the first thing that this committee does, use existing structures
Like
rather than.
adaptive reuse.
Adaptive.
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
yes. And now that it seems that Ballard Green, which was one of your suggestions, I don't know if the letter you just read, if that's going to take it off
It won't.
It won't,
It'll-
okay.
We'll discuss it, but that letter itself won't.
No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean if she pointed out some things that have to be looked into. Because if it's not possible to expand in Ballard Green,
Our
then,
recommendation is to look into it and pursue it if it's possible, so.
okay. And you had made a feasibility study only for the Prospect Ridge. My question last week was also that you had not done feasible studies for the other.
No, I spoke to the chairman of the Ridgefield Housing Authority.
Okay,
And I asked, why is that area not developed? And he said it's because we were constrained in the number of units by zoning.
okay. At Ballard Green, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I just wanted to express my concern, you know, and my appreciation for all that you do. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thanks.
More? More comments? Yes.
Hi, Andrea Beebe, 378 Main Street. I want to thank you all tonight. I thought the tone tonight was much better than last week. I actually have to say thank you. I appreciate, Kevin Brown, that you mentioned tonight what I brought up last week was, which was to look at that adaptive use of existing buildings. And I appreciate that you heard that. I know Krista heard it last week, because when I mentioned it to her, her head went like this. And I think we have buildings in this town that are existing. Why build more until we have to? And make sure when we do, they're well thought out and they're well planned. And they're not all concentrated into the center of town. Because I know you said, Dave, last week, well, that's where everything is. People come to the center of town to do business. The center of town is a nightmare with traffic, and until they get the traffic settled in the center of town, you're not going to get everybody on board. And there are people like myself, I agree with affordable housing, if it's well thought out and well planned and well suited around different areas in town. Because if we're looking at being more inclusive and more integrative, then it needs to be the entire town and not in one location centered in 3 or 4 streets around Main Street. And that but I do commend you for hearing my concern and my recommendation that we look at the upstairs of these buildings. We talk to the landlords, we talk to the builders, do what we can, retrofit them. They're empty. And that was in the paper this week. And there was also an article in the paper this week about the Reading sewer plan again. So I don't know how we can start looking at tying into Reading until they agree to give us sewer capacity. So those are my points, but I do thank you for tonight, and I appreciate the dialogue.
So, Andrea, if you don't mind if I just respond, I think I won't, if you heard our discussion, I wouldn't presume to speak for the committee, but I'll speak for myself. And I'll
But I
say,
appreciated you mentioning it.
yeah, I thought it was a great point, and we've talked a lot in our committee about adaptive reuse. It's hard to stick in the plan and say, well, we're gonna do this building or that building that are held by private landowners. But, you know, if the public has suggestions about other ideas like that, those are the ones that we need to hear.
I have one more thing to tell you. You guys chose May 14th. Just so you know, that is the spring stroll in town, 10 to 4. Traffic and parking is gonna be a nightmare. I think you should move the date.
Yes, we should. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Nicholas Fischetti, 43 Hayes Lane. First of all, I loved your comments. I think the adaptive reuse is the smartest and the fastest way to be able to help people and get some more affordable housing going. Number one. Number two, I find it offensive what you said, that affordable housing's all about getting the people to come, you know, they need the employees, because of course, everybody's gotta get their toenails done and get fed their meals here, and seniors and disabled. What about families who are struggling? Oh, I didn't hear that one. I heard the other 3. I heard the one about the people who come in and do your toenails. I didn't hear the other one. And so I think, you know, families that are struggling, you know, and of all races and nationalities. So maybe we could integrate our town a little bit, okay? That might even be better than that CRT nonsense. And actually let some of these lower income families come in here, okay, and integrate our town. I think that could be a really nice idea. Okay, and the last thing, oh, I almost lost my train of thought there for a minute. The last suggestion I have is perhaps some of these carriage houses on some of your wealthy entitled friends' estates that are being illegally rented. maybe they could actually legally rent them, like our town pension commissioner Hayes, who illegally rented the carriage house on his multi-million-dollar estate, got a $20,000 property tax discount, okay, because he merged his lots together, then he legally rented the whole thing. Perhaps if we would have let him, if we would allow some of that, we could have some affordable, within these large estates, some of these people could do that. Instead of committing property tax fraud against our town, costing $20,000 that the selectmen are well aware of, because they appointed Mr. Hayes to the Town Pension Commission while he was actively committing fraud against our town. Maybe we could figure out a way to allow these people to rent the entire structures on their property, pay, and get a little discount in property tax. I am serious. I think it's an excellent, so they get it both ways. It's basically what Hayes did. Hayes merged his lots, and he wasn't allowed to rent, because our law says it's a one-bedroom, 900 square foot. If he was allowed to rent the whole thing, okay, he could have got a bit of a property tax discount, and guess what? We could have maybe made it where, for that, he had to do it at an affordable rate. And guess what? The structure's there, just like we're talking about structures that exist. So I just, I'm sure nobody else threw this idea out, so I thought I'd come tonight and mention it. Thank you. Have a great night, folks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Carr?
First, I have I think a small point of order. I believe your agenda says in person only, and clearly you do have somebody who's signed in electronically. So, I think you could say we're going to have in person only for the public, but we will have, a dial-in for members. But it's a little misleading. The other thing is that it's clear that you've not voted on this plan, and I think that's appropriate, but because it's not complete, it's premature to vote on it. Section 12 in particular, which is a summary and action plan, is completely blank. And I don't see how you could have voted on it without that. But more importantly, I don't know how you could ask Planning and Zoning or the Board of Selectmen to vote on it, before you voted on it, but before you finish that. That's a blank check. That Section 12 may be the most important part of the plan. And I would recommend to Planning and Zoning and to the Board of Selectmen that until they get at Section 12, that it would be inappropriate for them to endorse this plan. So I hope you will complete the plan. I hope you'll tell us what you have in mind so that people can make a decision based upon an honest, complete accounting of what your plan is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the section that you're talking about will just simply be a summary of all of the action items that are listed elsewhere in the plan. So that won't be completed until we have all the action items yet. So it's just taking them here and copying them here and then saying who's going to be assigned to them. That's all that section is.
Well, why don't you do it? If it's that easy, do it.
Because it's not done yet.
Clearly.
It's not done because we don't have a plan yet. We don't have I can't summarize a plan that hasn't been approved yet, or that hasn't been discussed yet.
Well, I don't see how you can submit a plan for people to endorse that you haven't completed, that you haven't voted on. You want Planning and Zoning and Board of Selectmen to endorse this plan. You've presented it. It's not complete. Someone used a term the other evening that was rather rude, but it is half-baked. And at this point, I don't see any way that you're going to make this deadline with this plan. You ought to be thinking about a plan B, about how you're going to comply with 830J, because you're not going to make it the way you're going.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence in the committee. Yes, ma'am.
May I suggest something?
Could you please stand up and give us your name and address?
Robin Caruso, Conley Court. Why did you not consider using one of Westcogg's plans and just doing an annex like everybody else has?
Because that was not available to us until we were long down the road.
But it's okay to regroup. You've admitted yourself that it's not complete, and it seems like there's a lot of holes.
No, when I say it's not complete, I don't mean that there's content in the plan that hasn't been thought of yet. For example, we don't have a letter from the first selectman, we don't have a letter from the Commissioner of Planning and Zoning.
But they're probably not gonna do that until they approve the plan, and if the plan isn't complete, how can they improve it? So it's kinda like, what came first, the chicken or
So,
the egg?
well, all of this section that Mr. Carr is talking about is just a summary.
No, I know, right, no, I saw those.
So the plan will be complete. It just won't have the summary and won't have the appendix in it.
But like from some of the discussions from last week and then this week, your action items were, Prospect Ridge, Ballard Green, and Branchville, and we know those are all kind of out at this point.
No, we don't know that.
But we don't know they're in.
Right. Branchville you can't do, but I mean, the select woman just said, no one's hooking into our sewer. So,
Yeah.
That's what she said.
That's
There's
on record.
also, if you look at the Branchville plan, you see that there are options that don't require a
okay,
separate sewer
well,
system.
there's a lot, and then Ballard Green, we know it goes against the state wetlands if we.
No, we don't know that. All
Well,
we know
it's-
is that it is, that we're constrained by the number of units that are allowed by zoning.
Well, the
But zoning
zoning
can
because
change.
of the wetlands and the water
No, no,
source.
no. The zoning is, it's a multifamily regulation that says you can have no more than whatever it is, 6 units.
Okay, I don't want to argue with you on that, that's fine, I'm sure you've talked to the wetlands board and talked to them about it, but, anyway, my question was really, why not consider adopting one of the West Cog plans and doing an annex to it and calling it a day?
Because we're doing a plan that's much more, we believe, no, I'm sorry, I believe, I don't want to speak for the committee, is much more well thought out. It is much more tailored to our needs and much more specific. It's a plan for Ridgefield. What the other towns have done is just appended a few pages onto a regional plan. So as I said last week in the meeting to start, this really is about regaining local control, because if we don't do it our way, the state is going to require us to do it their way.
Well, most of the numbers in the report come from the regional groups anyway. You reference, and that's where those numbers came from. Whenever anybody posts something, we get attacked. Oh, that's not what we're saying, that's misinformation. When people say, oh, there's a number of 1,100 because that's what one of the housing groups told us that we need for our town. And that's the number that you had in the plan. And I know that's not the number you said we have to build, but it's still in the plan. So
Right.
maybe just take it out of the plan. When you have those numbers in the plan, it's a dangerous precedent, because if you adopt this plan, everything that's in that plan you have to answer to it.
Well, if you read our plan, it says this is what the others say. We need
Oh, no, I
11,
know.
We need 1,200. We don't think we can do that.
Well,
But as we put the plan together, we felt it was important to include those.
right, but I'm just saying the information in the plan came from a lot of regional sources, so
Of course.
why not just use the regional plan?
Because the Ridgefield plan is tailored to Ridgefield.
Okay. I disagree,
Okay,
but
thank you for your comments.
So,
Yes.
thank you, Dave. Andrea Beebe again. So if this is Ridgefield's plan, and if I heard correctly last week, especially after Robin read the letter, isn't a lot of this based on the desegregate Connecticut plan? So how is that Ridgefield's plan different than if we were to say West Cog's plan amended to fit Ridgefield? That could be Ridgefield's plan. So why don't we put them side by side and take a look at them and see which one's gonna be a better fit for our town and meet the mandates by the state? I think we're losing an opportunity here, and we're gonna get locked into a plan that may not be the best choice.
Have you read the Westcog plan?
No.
Okay. If you read it, you'll see that it's not a plan. It's just front matter. It's a lot of data and a
But
lot of
you've got,
data analytics.
how many communities are adapting the West Cog plan and annexing
Too many.
it and adding it onto their own? I mean, what's the harm of looking? This is why the 11th hour for these things are never good. Because now, we're learning about these West Cog plans and that other towns are looking at it and annexing it. But now I feel like we're up against the wall and we have no choice. And we should, as residents and taxpayers, have a voice and a choice. And again, I will say the same thing I said last week. COVID really hurt us in this process because we did not have the opportunity as a community to come to more of these meetings publicly. I followed them online because I sat at home at night and watched Zoom meetings to see how our town was working. Not everybody had Zoom. or wanted to stay up for 3 hours at night and watch all the town meetings, but I did, because I don't have
Or was
kids at home.
capable of it.
But what I'm saying is, now people are
Yeah.
starting to wake up and listen, and they're starting to hear what's going on, and they're starting to come to meetings, and they're starting to ask questions. And I just think that if we're going to extend beyond June 1st, and we ask for an extension, why not take the little extra time and look at the plans? I don't see what it could hurt. We might actually get some good ideas and combine the best ideas of all the plans into a true Ridgefield plan. I keep hearing this Ridgefield plan, but to me, it's a desegregate Connecticut plan. And I would rather have it be
We
more of a
in no way
true Ridgefield
collaborated
plan.
with Desegregate Connecticut on this. This was our own plan created by our own committee. There are some things we suggest that Desegregate Connecticut also suggests, but they are in no way driving this committee. And anybody's welcome to disagree with that.
No way.
Sir, thank you for your, anything else, Andrea?
No, thank you, Dave.
Sir?
Stephen Saloon, Florida Road, and I just want to thank you all for your work. Governing is brutal, right? I mean, it's really, the housing is a hard issue. Working for years under a state required, in a state required pursuit, to come up with really housing answers where the state actually has its own penalty that it's going to, or its own remedy that's going to kick in if Ridgefield doesn't choose its own way forward, puts pressure on Ridgefield to make really hard choices and figure out how to come up with answers that none of which are easy. So I just want to thank you all for your work. I know it's going on for years. It's had to go on for years. You've had to start in a place and spend time doing this, and most people don't have the time or ability to, and you probably don't even, right, to invest in all this time for months and years. And I just want to acknowledge how hard this is, what you're doing. And yet, the state has a housing crisis. The county has a housing crisis. The town has a housing crisis. I mean, even the numbers are patent.
Yeah.
And it threatens.
Country.
I mean, yeah,
Country was that, yeah.
true,
Right.
right, and so.
But we
it's
got
a
about 20 million
just a
more
second,
people here.
I understand, no, I
Come in
understand.
on
Can I just finish? But it's still, we got a problem. And it's a problem, and it's kind of not easy for every individual to enable the country to fix the problem.
Right.
So we have to work through governments to fix the problem. And frankly, the can's kicking it down to the road to the towns, right? And they're not really handling the problem. They're saying, you guys fix it, and if you don't, we're gonna impose something on you that makes you really uncomfortable, the 830G. Which is why we're trying to avoid the 830G, because that's the only thing we're getting from the state. And so you guys have to spend 5 years working on this plan pursuant to statute, and it's hard, and it takes a lot of work, and you're busting your tails to try to get all this information. And most people become aware of it at the last minute. So I just want to acknowledge the brutal position I think you're also in, but also thank you for taking it, and for carrying through, and for staying strong on behalf of Ridgefield, even though no matter what you do and say, everyone's going to complain, or all sorts of people are going to complain no matter what the answer is. So I thank you for your work, and yeah, it won't be my last time to show up here.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Sandy Lucy, I live on Florida Hill Road. I just feel like you have some more work to do on the plan, because the numbers in the plan are very outdated. Like, I think a really important section is section 5.4, which talks about the other deed restricted developments we have. And you're saying the data is from January 2020. And I know a lot of building has gone on in the past 2 years. So, a big part of the plan shouldn't be 2 or 3 pages on what the 35 people you interviewed said 3 years ago. That's hearsay, because of course you're gonna pick the ones that support what you want them to say. A very important thing will be to list all of the units we have, to show the state what, how much affordable housing we have. And that you said in one sentence. You said 4 of you said that we have 12 developments, this is as of 2 years ago, that include a combination of units that are government assisted. But 4 of these developments are either under construction or in limbo. So basically you said, we're not gonna include them in our research.
Those numbers are up to date.
But they're as of 2 years ago, over 2 years old. these numbers. It says, Ridgefield, it says as of 2020, January 2020, Ridgefield has 144 units that are 830G or deed restricted. That's
Right.
of January 2020.
Okay,
That's
that might be where
outdated.
the last numbers were, but I don't think anything's happened.
In the past 2 years?
You know what, we'll have to go back and look at that,
Yeah,
but we were pretty
because I
sure.
would love to look at that. Where can I find that?
Well, for a couple things, there is a list of all of the deed restricted and government assisted housing in Ridgefield, and we have that. And actually, planning and zoning has that, you can ask them
I
for
can
it, and they
ask
keep it
planning
up to
and
date, and
zoning.
they
Okay.
file something every
They've got
year
it. Okay.
with the state on that.
Okay.
So that should be up to date, and
Okay.
that's the information we use. Now, there have been some lists, there have been some units on the list back then in 2020 for development, which were never developed.
Okay.
So,
And there are some that were not done at that time, and they are.
Yeah, I know there are some.
So those
That
have
have
changed.
done
Wouldn't
it
that
this
be the
year.
number?
Like a Great Hill Road, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
that's included in the list.
Yeah.
No, but at the time of 2020, it was under construction.
Okay, but it's,
Yeah, and I
but
know
I know when we
Prospect
did it, we
Ridge,
brought the
but
list up to date.
Ridgefield Apartments has another building. I think there's some new buildings in the past 2 years.
Yeah, that should reflect.
North Street
Yeah, like I would really love a really good list to see how many of units we have. Part of me is wondering why we're not going for a state certificate of affordability housing completion. Like New Canaan is, like a lot of other towns are
Oh,
doing.
yeah, we'll go for more time. We need another 102.
Well, that's according to these numbers. I would love to really do a really,
Well,
really good
we did
count.
that. I mean,
Can I help?
it's
Like,
in the-
you need another person
That's great.
that's, just a regular
well, the
count.
data that's in the plan should be accurate,
Yeah.
up to date.
Okay, so where do I go to get that?
Check with the town planner, Alice D, DEW.
Okay.
Can I just expand on something she was saying, because I think I know, I was actually looking at this today as well. When you counted the units at Box Hill and Casagmo, I know they're not technically deed restricted because they're not deed restricted, but those houses would meet the affordability component as far as how much.
Some would, yeah.
Yeah, those should be highlighted in our plan.
Right, so
We
I-
should be proud of that.
Right.
We're just down.
So you mentioned them, so if you count, I have to find where I made my notes here. If you count those along with the deed restricted houses, which I think you said were 141, let me find my numbers. And that's not even counting all the other affordable, naturally occurring affordable housing. We're at like 900, I think it was 10 under the 10%, so it was like 890 units. And I get that they're not deed restricted, but why aren't we pushing them more, like Sandy was
Why
saying?
are we really
Why aren't
trying
we
to do a really
saying,
good count and?
based on this, and yes, they're naturally occurring, however, based on this, we have this many affordable houses. I mean, 20% of our housing is already multifamily. So for the people who say we don't have enough
And my question, if New
multifamily, we do.
Canaan was able to do
15%.
it,
Canaan, I can tell you, doesn't have it, or all those
And
towns
they put an
that she
application
mentioned do not have that kind of affordable housing, but we have natural affordable housing.
Right.
New Canaan is 4 times.
Right.
Wilton
But
is
you
twice
do,
the
please
price.
understand, and we have to wrap this meeting up, it's almost 10 o'clock. Understand that we cannot count that. We mentioned in the plan that there is naturally occurring affordable housing, but it can't be counted because we have no way of making sure that the people who live in it qualify for affordable housing, and so it's not considered affordable.
Right, but Dave, I actually, this is a point, I mentioned it to you earlier when we talked. I actually believe we need to make it more clear in our plan that we have the existence of housing that,
yeah, like
of a greater abundance that falls underneath what could be affordable.
It should be right on the first
Unfortunately, the way the state counts it, it doesn't qualify.
We have a
but-
chart about
push
that
it.
that will add to the
Right.
plan.
But shouldn't we, I think we should start with that. That should be highlighted, that should be right at the beginning, because we should be pushing that and it shouldn't be hidden
It should,
somewhere.
it should certainly be more
I don't mean
prominent.
hidden, I mean, it should be more prominent, forget, that's what I meant. So can we, is that something that you will consider doing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so is someone taking notes from this meeting?
Somebody's taking
Yeah,
minutes.
like, will the committee
Wonderful.
consider, if you need help, like from a townsperson, an unbiased person, who will try to really do the count and, make sure that.
See me after the
count is
meeting and
done?
give me your name,
Sounds
please,
good,
and
thank you.
contact
Thanks.
information. All right, are there any more public comments? And then we have to wrap it up, Mr. Carr.
First of all, I'm sorry I didn't get your name. I think there is an exaggerated impression of the need, the local need for affordable housing. Ridgefield has 2% poverty rate, and 3% of our housing is in that low-income restricted category. We're one of 70 towns in the state of Connecticut that has a higher percentage of affordable low-income housing than we have poverty. There's 16 people who are on the list of the Housing Authority who are from Ridgefield out of 82 people that are on that list. Mr. Goldenberg has said that will take years. The average length of time that someone from Ridgefield has been on that list is 11 months. The average amount of time that a person from outside Ridgefield has been on that list is 16 months. There is an attempt to exaggerate the local crisis, which is not a crisis, in low-income housing. There are some needs at the higher level where we do need to get more young families in here, and we also need to provide for people who want to age in place. But the low-income housing that is proposed, or that when they talk about affordable housing, no, it's not affordable for everyone. It's for people who don't live here, in fact, who are from someplace else. And the state wants us to take, quote, our fair share. That's ridiculous. You know, our fair share of the state's problems, of Hartford's problems. It doesn't make sense. Let us take care of our problems, and they're very different problems than the rest of the state. They're characterized differently. We should address our problems. It's our plan, not Hartford's plan.
Excellent.
Just briefly, I get your point. There's also a chicken and egg problem there too, right? If you can't afford to rent or to buy in Ridgefield, then you can't enjoy really the wonderful things that Ridgefield has to offer. And that's part of really the regional situation, and that's part of the state situation. And we have a state that is set up that is highly dependent on local property taxes for local education and local services. And so it's complicated. But I see what you're saying, and I think I trust that it's factually correct. But I think there's a larger point as well that's worth considering, which is that it's hard to get into a really nice town unless you already got a bunch of money. And there's a lot of working people that want to live in a nice town that are good people that aren't wealthy. And so it's really more about, really some opportunity, right? Breadth of housing opportunity as well. So your point's well taken, but I hope you can appreciate mine.
Thank you.
And just one point, I know you mentioned a list of people who live here and how long they wait. I know my son was well over 2 years waiting on a list, and he's lived in town for affordable housing. So just statistically, it would be interesting to know, and where the list is today. I would love to see.
If I get your email address, I'll be happy to send you. I'll send you my report. From the FOIA. Happy to give it to anybody.
Thanks.
In fact, Mr. Goldenberg has it, but I don't think he shared it.
Probably not.
Just one thing to take into consideration, because I learned this not too long ago. When you're evaluating this plan, I think you need to research a little bit more about the 830G moratorium. They're very difficult to get now, and the current legislature is starting to move away from a moratorium because they want these, units developed. So you're solving towards a moratorium that is likely not going to exist, so we should take that into consideration. And then just to the last point that was made, your numbers, which I did see, Mr. Carr, are accurate. The difference is there was a little bit lengthier period during COVID because they couldn't show units and people weren't moving in. So that period during COVID did extend.
I'm sorry.
May I ask one other question?
Go ahead.
If you were finished, okay. I meant to ask this before, I'm sorry, Christine Moore. The email address that you gave, housingforridgefield@gmail.com, is if anybody has suggestions or input, is that correct?
Right.
Okay,
And we'll get an official, we don't have an official town email
okay,
address. We'll
but
get
that's the
but
one we
that
can
will
use for
work
now.
too.
Okay, and is that, is every member on the committee get access to the emails that we send?
No, but I'll circulate it.
Okay, so, because I think that's a good idea for transparency, that every member of the committee should get access to all of the communication. So, thank you.
Could I just add one thing? 830G has been on the books for 30 years. We've had 38 in this town, according to Rebecca Machete. We've had 38 830G applications, most of which have been approved. According to the committee's numbers, if we just did 830G, we'd have 17 affordable units. So that means we'd have 3 times as many
Market rate.
market rate, which would be, most of which I think you'd find would be naturally occurring affordable housing. So, I mean, I think the 830G would solve most of our problems. I live in an 830G development. I'm not in one of the 830G units, but I understand 830G has a lot of benefits for people, not only those who, need low-income housing, but for others that need market rate housing. And I actually think the 830G, letting 830G take its course, would probably solve most of Ridgefield's natural needs. But I don't think the committee would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think history indicates that either, but.
I think it's a little misleading to call it low-income housing. It's really affordable housing.
No, it is. It's low-income restricted. You have to be, to get into it, you have to be below a certain income level.
But what we're talking about is.
That's what we're talking about. That's exactly what you're talking about.
80% of the state median income in our case,
Or below.
or below.
Well, it means that, a lot of the teachers, the people who work.
The teachers are well above that rate.
Right.
Teachers make more than, the teachers, the police, they all make more than that. They wouldn't qualify.
We have, I'm sorry, I'm looking forward to the next
Thank
public
you
information session.
for your time.
Does anybody have any more comments? If not, we have to move on with our business. Thank you. Minutes, we have to get to the minutes. So I sent you again today minutes from the last 2 meetings. Are there any edits?
Yes, sir.
Any other comments?
Oh, he said no.
Could be a motion to accept them as submitted. Could you, if you can talk, would you mind going outside, we just have a couple other things to finish up here. So there's a motion from Kent, is there a second? Second, Sharon, it's not subject to debate, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, all opposed. Minutes are approved. Is there a sorry?
It's fraud. The town issued the guy a fraudulent CO, but they can make it legitimate and let those communities. It's an excellent.
All right, do you want to read them now?
Look, go up Main Street. Rudy's trying to illegally rent the one on this property.
Okay, so, I don't understand, do you want us to wait, Deborah, to read the minutes, or? Okay.
You can vote on it.
Yeah, we just did.
Right.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
When are we gonna figure out the date for May 14th? Hasn't worked out?
Oh, yeah.
For what, for our next meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, spring stroll.
Town stroll.
We'll do a better job of completing the calendar. Oh, yeah. Well, May 21st, I guess.
No,
A lot of people are out then.
I'm in North Carolina, my daughter.
Right. His daughter would be quite disappointed.
We could do it May 7th. May 7th.
We could do May 7th.
I have a plan later in the day.
And that's next,
Midday.
that's a week
We
from
might-
Saturday.
Week from Saturday, May 7th?
For our meeting.
For the public, for the public information
I
session.
thought that was the 14th.
Probably the 14th is
Spring
that
stroll.
spring stroll, so the time will be gridlocked.
Oh, so we can't do it that day, you're saying?
Well, they have to plan, they've had to plan for 2 weeks, they'll have it for another week or 2.
We just need to give it enough notice for public.
Yeah.
Right. They're gonna get the paper on Thursday, maybe?
Well, today's the 27th.
Well, why not May 7th?
What about on another day, but a Saturday?
Well, we can do it during the week, but then there has to be a room available.
I thought the idea was that you have a contingent in town that can't make it on the
Right.
weekdays, and then an opposite contingent that.
Oh, that, yeah.
What's wrong with May 7th? Because I'm not sure if I can go, but aside from that, what's wrong with May 7th?
I mean, the only reason I like May 7th is because I'll go back to my point of urgency.
Yeah.
We have to be urgent here, and I'll keep adding things, and we just need to keep moving.
And we've got to start editing comments in.
Is that enough
Yes.
time to give the public, if we get it, if we agree on it,
It's the
we can get it
27th.
out tomorrow morning?
You'll
What
get
day?
it, you'll get the paper on
10
Thursday,
days.
the 5th, and the
Yeah.
section on Sunday.
But it'll also, they'll post it beforehand.
The paper won't be able to, the press won't.
The press will get it out next Thursday.
Days before the.
So there's some point at which this committee will talk amongst ourselves, with and without the public, I guess it's with the public.
We can't talk about the public.
We'll talk with about
Right now we can
what
talk.
some of the suggestions, for instance, that were made.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So we're gonna gather all the public input, we're gonna gather input from the Board of Selectmen, input from planning and zoning, and then we sit down with that and say, okay, how do we adjust the
So
plan?
I think that we need two dates. We need a date for the public information session, and then we need a date to publish a revised plan.
Well, this is the problem. If we publish a revised plan, we actually file a revised plan, then it's another 35 days before the
Sorry,
hearing.
a red line of
A red
plan,
line of
whatever it is,
plan.
you know, whatever like,
Yeah.
current and best thinking
I
is.
think that's good that we have it on the 7th, because at least we can get our red line revised plan out sooner than later.
Are you gonna be able to make all the changes, like P and Z meets on the 4th, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll send it to you maybe on the 5th?
Yeah, so if we can meet like maybe the 11th or 12th,
The 11th is a Wednesday.
What that might, what that meeting be for?
Are we
To go
doing,
over-
we're gonna do the P and Z
to review.
suggestions after the public, after the
Yeah.
public?
Right. Otherwise, the 16th, the Monday.
11th won't work for me, I've got a hard commitment. 12th would work, I mean,
The concern I have is, are we going to put into the plan what P and Z tells us for the 7th?
Well, no, we're
What
going to,
P&Z
we're going
gives
to
us-
consider their comments, yes.
Okay,
We don't have to put in everything they
because
say.
people are gonna be asking things and
Yeah.
P and Z might have already covered it.
Yeah, it's our choice how to update the plan, but it's up to them to pass it.
We wanna make sure we listen to their suggestions, right? It's our choice, but we need to listen to their suggestions, right?
I mean, I guess if I had my druthers, I mean, I'm mindful of Whit's point about urgency,
Yeah.
but if I had my druthers, I guess I'd rather have an opportunity to digest what we hear from P and Z.
right.
Possibly
Exactly.
make it known what we've taken on board from the various input before we have another public information session. Although I suppose we could also do it after the second public information session, but before the public hearing is another way to do it.
Could we do?
Which is the way to say, I don't really know what
Yeah.
we should do, I suppose.
What about if P and Z gave it to us in a form that we could? If they gave it to us in a form that we could attach,
Well, Kent and I are going to interview them and get their feedback and capture.
P and Z.
No,
No,
oh,
I'm talking about
they'll-
P and Z.
P and Z will give us, we say, bullet points.
Yeah, well, the bullet points are gonna go into, Rob, and then they're gonna discuss it all. I don't know what format he's gonna give it to you.
But regardless of the form, I'm sorry, to interrupt you, but regardless of the format, will it be delivered to us as, this is planning and zoning's input, or are we gonna get, you know, a stack of sheets that's, you know, this is from this person, and that's from that person? and-
No, I don't think that, because he was saying that he wanted everybody to give bullet points, and they would go to him, then they would discuss them all.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know what form he's gonna give it to us.
Just as a point of order, I don't think we should be, conducting a lot of business after the meeting is
Yeah,
over.
We haven't
But
adjourned
I-
yet.
I understand, but I think we're just trying to pick a date, aren't we?
Yeah,
Let's
so
try to
we're
keep
trying
it to
to
that,
make
I
it-
mean, and I'm more anxious to get home than anything, but I mean, we can
That's
go on
my
for another
bedtime.
2 hours, I'm sure.
So,
But-
public information meeting on the 7th, why don't we do like the 12th to have that's Thursday, to have our own meeting?
Cheryl, you still there? Cheryl? Oh, okay, she's still here.
Good.
You still here, right? Okay.
So what's a suggested date?
Thursday the 12th.
That could work for me.
Yeah.
7 PM.
7 PM, yeah, I'll have to find a location, I don't know what's available, but I'll let you know.
Is it ever possible to do it be earlier than 7 PM, so we're not getting done at, 10:30?
Can people meet at 6?
6:30?
6:30?
Anything would help, I mean, I'm just
6:30.
on, trying to,
I know, you're an old, you have to be in bed by 9.
You like 6?
I don't like 6.
I should take a dance class.
I normally have my pajamas on by now.
All right, 7.
Maybe I can get to it.
7 to 9.
I beat you, I'm
We'll
asleep
just
by
make sure we have
now.
our prep. Okay,
7 o'clock on May.
That's fine.
7 o'clock on May 12th. All right,
7 o'clock,
and is there anything else?
6:30?
7
I'm
o'clock.
sorry, hold on, Mayor.
7 o'clock.
May 12th is our next board meeting then?
The next committee meeting, yes. It'll be a special meeting to discuss.
Okay, yeah.
The public information session is now on the 7th,
10 to
Yes,
12.
okay.
10 to 12.
And the public information meeting is still the same time, right?
Yeah.
The public information is 10 to 12
On the 7th.
on the 7th.
12.
And the special meeting is Thursday the 12th, 7 to 9.
Very good.
All right,
Okay.
may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Kevin, second. Lori, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Unanimous.
Yes, unanimous.